standardizing language for describing mental health conditions can reduce the stigma associated with the condition and encourage people to access treatment. However, certain ways of talking about mental illness can alienate members of the community, and, and it might also contribute to stigma and discrimination. Unequal distribution of resources and awareness within our field, as well as lack of awareness outside the field of psychology, may contribute to problems regarding the use of language and its negative consequences. Therefore, a shift in language is essential towards facilitating access to mental health resources and services. Today's panel discussion will address how the use of language affects stigma around mental health and how we can change our daily use of language to be more sensitive. Over to you, Praneet.
Thank you, Gurshil. Firstly, I'd like...
Excuse me. Ma'am, are you unmuted now?
Yes, ma'am is unmuted. Yeah, she's co-host. Yeah.
Dr. Sanjana, are you unmuted? Sanjana ma'am is also joined, but Sangeeta, please unmute Dr. Sanjana. She is also... Sanjana ma'am, can you unmute yourself now? She is joined, but I don't know what's the issue here. Okay, I think we can continue. I'll just...
मैडम आप कह दीजिए, वो मैडम अपना वीडियो ऑन कर लेंगी या हैंड रेज कर देंगी.
जी सर.
आप शुरू करा ले.
Continue, please.
Firstly, I'd like to call upon the stage principal ma'am, Dr. Harpreet Kaur. Dr. Harpreet Kaur made her mark in academics. A gold medalist in her master's, she has a teaching experience of over 3 decades. She has authored and co-authored 27 books, published 39 papers in national and international journals. She has presented a number of papers in national and international conferences, notably at Stanford University, California, University of Ottawa, Canada, and Warsaw School of Economics, Poland. Ma'am is a true inspiration to many who foresee themselves excelling in academics. She has also been awarded the Commonwealth Innovation Award, the Great Indian Teachers Award, and the Great Indian Women Award in 2021. I would now like to request ma'am to please speak to the audience.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, this event, which is organized by Department of Psychology and IQAC Mathusundari College for Women, I really welcome both the speakers for today, Dr. Ishita Nagar and Dr. Sanjana Seth. Dr. Sanjana Seth, psychologist, physiotherapist, and academician, and I welcome you, ma'am, for joining us. And Dr. Ishita, a young psychologist and young influencer from our own fraternity, and I'm very happy that you have joined us. And of course, Dr. Garima, Dr. Harinder Sandhu, Dr. Pranita, Dr. Lokesh, and of course, most importantly, both the students and all other students who are comparing and all other students who have joined. So I welcome you all on this very, very important topic, language, sensitivity, and stigma. Very interesting. If you read through this, I think it becomes a very interesting read, although it is not my subject, but the whole thing makes you really think many things, and you come up with new things. For example, and of course, it is a part of our activity where we are commemorating this Mental Health Awareness Month. We have commemorated certain programs, and this is a part of that chain that we want to do more and more things about mental health awareness. Now, this language, sensitivity, and stigma. When we start with language, I think language for us is almost instinctively we learn language. Of course, we have to work on it, but almost all of us speak one language, another language, or maybe multiple languages, and we take it for granted. It becomes very simple, like as if we are breathing, we are blinking, or we're eating, and so on. So these basic instincts, it becomes like a basic instinct. But we must understand that it is, of course, a very, very complex skill. And if we have to master a language, we have to also understand what is inherent in it, because it will explain to us that what we are, how the human beings become human. And so it is all expression of being human. And in this whole sense, this language acquisition opens up our mind. And when this language is so unique and it is influencing the individual, we can say that language is reflection of us. It is reflecting our thinking, how we communicate, how we express things, how we feel, what is our opinion, how we express the ideas, how we attain knowledge, attain information. So it helps us in making certain concept, so understanding certain concept, and also very abstract thinking. What it means to be, and what is the what is inherent in it. What is obviously said, but also what is not said is also there in the language, and so it gives a logical meaning to our thoughts. But at the same time, it is also important to understand that language is a bridge between it's a kind of a social connectivity with each other, and it will help us to maintain social relations, or even for that matter disintegrate social relations. So all societies, economic, social conditions, and education conditions, a lot depends on what the language is. And so world which is so disconnected is connected, is attached through proper means of communication expressed in language. In this sense, language becomes power. So language actually forges a kind of a understanding, a belonging, whether you belong to a family or a community or a culture or a country. So that belonging comes. If I take an example from medieval times, and so that time, I think in India, especially in the Hindustan, this whole subcontinent, where Urdu and Persian was the language of the aristocratic class. And in that sense, the one who spoke, or they were actually allowed to amass this language, is understand this language or study this language only when you belong to an elite class. But in this whole sense, I remember I want to really explain to students that how a simple language was introduced by Guru Nanak, and subsequently Gurmukhi script was perfected by Guru Angad Dev Ji. And this writing of Bani and compiling the Bani by Guru Arjan in Gurmukhi script in Sri Guru Granth Sahib, this shook the Mughals, because here language became a kind of a counter to the power which they were, or the atrocious power of the Mughals. And this in fact led to the martyrdom of Guru Arjan Dev. So this is a simple example how language and the content which is contained in it can be instrumental in awakening the masses, or it can put a challenge, a formidable challenge to those atrocious and exploitative powers. So language that way is not neutral. It has got inherent power structure also. And we have so if we say that language is transparent, it is not so transparent. We cannot represent the things very transparently. So in this sense, the whole theme of the session, where the language plays a huge role in normalizing, sensitizing, and even stigmatizing the mental health and illness, I think this will be explained by a psychologist, how stigma and discrimination can make somebody comfortable, discomfortable, and discomfort can come in, and so on. And so in this sense, as a teacher, if I understand that there is a student who has certain problems, and if I highlight that, and of course I would be making the person uncomfortable, so I should not be doing it. I'm just talking about as our duty. And so we must understand that how a word of appreciation or word of recognition for the small works done by the students, or can be a propelling factor, where they will be enthused to do a lot many things. So this is all, I think it is all there, how we put it, how we understand it. And I think psychologists, from the psychologist point of view, is that understanding is very important. And our two psychologists are there, and of course our whole psychology department, who have thought of this very pertinent topic. And I thank them from the core of my heart, and welcome all once again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now I would like to invite Kirandeep and Simran Kaur to please give us a short presentation on mental health.
Thank you, Praneeth. We'll just begin in a minute.
I hope everyone can see my screen.
Screen is not visible.
Right now it's black. I
Not
think there
visible.
is some.
Yeah,
Right now it's visible.
yeah, good to go.
A very good afternoon to all present here today. We hope that you've been well. Today, Kirandeep and I, Simran, will be giving a short presentation of our research on behalf of our group, which was conducted under the guidance and support of Dr. Harinder Sandhu. We've all been through this horrifying global pandemic of COVID-19. Being students of psychology honors, we wanted to take up a domain that is less explored and thus decided to assess and study the impact of COVID-19 on college going students. The aim of our research was to study the effects of COVID-19 on various domains like academics, social relationships, emotional, physical, and mental stress, etc., among college going students belonging to colleges of Delhi NCR. This research took into account the temporal dimension in terms of the first and the second wave of COVID-19.
After deciding upon the topic for the research, the entire group together developed a self-constructed relevant questionnaire. The next step involved setting the age of the target sample of the study, which was decided to be 18 to 21-year-old students of colleges in Delhi NCR. Moving forward, the questionnaire was then given structure on Google Forms and a pre-testing was conducted so as to receive constructive feedback and work upon any improvement suggested. Lastly, the form was administered to the sample population and the data was collected and then interpreted. Now, coming on to some major findings that we obtained, let us have a look at the slides. These are the domains on which our study focused, and now we will be discussing the results and the major findings.
Coming on to the domain of academics, as can be seen in the pie charts in the slide, learning was majorly impacted. Most participants expressed that their teachers and professors were very supportive and understanding, but despite the support and help received, most of them found it difficult to understand concepts, expressed a decline in concentration, especially during the second wave, as well as showed an increase in the difficulty to participate in class owing to the shift from offline to online mode of education.
As humans, all of us strive to grow. Self-growth is indeed essential as it helps us to enhance our strengths, improve mental health, and even heal our relationships. As seen in this domain during the pandemic, people learned to become more independent and self-sufficient as they got more time to understand themselves better. The participants even expressed gratitude for having access to basic necessities of life like food, shelter, and social support.
COVID-19, as we all know, is a communicable viral disease which has impacted the physical and mental health of millions of people around the world. Thus, during this time, health can be considered a major source of stress for individuals. As seen in our study, most people were worried about their own health as well as the health of their loved ones. Fortunately, most of them did not report any positive or negative impacts on their health caused by the current situation.
India, being a country that follows a collectivistic culture, highlights the importance of social support and relationships. The present study showed that the majority of participants felt that their relationships with their family and friends were impacted positively, particularly during the first wave, but with the occurrence of the second wave, a negative impact slightly increased.
It was also observed that during the first wave, the people rarely went out to meet their friends, but there was a slight increase, as was seen in stepping out and meeting friends during the second wave, possibly because of familiarity with the situation, as well as the frustration from being home stuck.
The situation of the pandemic itself became a stressor for most of us, which is congruent with the results obtained from the study. The participants expressed experiencing stress during both waves. Keeping in mind the severity of the second wave, it could be seen that people did report experiencing more stress during the latter phase, despite the fact that most of them felt that they were prepared to face the second wave after experiencing the first wave. Because of the pandemic, going out was restricted, which may have had a circular effect on the students. Thus, in order to overcome the stress, majority of the participants adopted strategies such as watching shows and movies, spending time on social media, listening to music, and exercising in descending order, in addition to many more strategies, as can be seen on the screen. Next slide. All in all, this current research was conducted to find out the impact the pandemic had on the life of college-going students. Our research findings have shown that in all major domains assessed, students did face issues and stressors so as to cope with the new normal, as it is in no way easy to adapt to such unpredictable situations of life. The pandemic brought with it its own challenges, but with time, we have learned to adapt to these ambiguous situations.
Even though the pandemic has been majorly negative, some positives can be imbibed from it as well. The pandemic indeed gave us time to understand ourselves better. It has even given us an opportunity to spend quality time with our families and has also taught us the importance of living in the present. These times have been tough for all of us in different ways, but we have learned to cope with it and have emerged as stronger people altogether. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kiran and Simran. I think it was a great presentation. It was definitely very insightful and informative. Now, today we have with us Dr. Itisha Nagar and Dr. Sanjana Seth. I will begin by introducing Dr. Sanjana. Dr. Sanjana Seth specializes in child, adolescent, and adult mental health issues and life skills training. She is a National Committee member of Association of Rehabilitation Psychologists and Professionals, ARPP India. Dr. Sanjana has also been associated with armed forces, medical centers, schools, and special schools for more than 2 decades. Additionally, she is also associated with an NGO for behavioral training of personnel from police and paramilitary forces. She has contributed significantly to the field and has written many research papers and book chapters. She was last appointed at the Department of Psychiatry, Command Hospital, Chandigarh.
Now, I would like to introduce Dr. Itisha. Dr. Ishita Nagar is a specialist in clinical and gender psychology. She was awarded the prestigious Junior Research Fellowship by the Government of India for pursuing doctoral research in the area of high-functioning autism. Her work has been featured in The First Post, The Guardian, and Youth Ki Awaaz. She has also published research papers in various reputed journals. She has been actively involved in numerous talks, webinars, and live sessions on mental health awareness, gendered experiences, sexism, depression, positive psychology, and many other psychological issues. Neurodiversity is one of her recent areas of interest. She is a passionate feminist, and some of you may know her as Professor Drape on Instagram. Thank you for being here, ma'am. Over to you, Dr. Sanjana.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for your kind introduction, and a very warm welcome to this segment of the panel discussion that has been decided for today. I would like to thank Dr. Harinder Malhotra also and her entire team, for selecting this wonderful, pertinent topic for the discussion today. Because when she got in touch with me, my initial the thing was to kind of say no, because I'm traveling and I'm in transit. But the minute she told me the concept as to what topic they're going to have for today, I agreed immediately. I said that this is something, stigma, language, the word that we use, communication is so close to my heart that there is no way that I'm going to miss out on this interaction with the youngsters. So thank you all of you for giving me this opportunity. And should I be proceeding with the session further? Okay, all right. So as we all know that how important the communication is, it's something which is a core, a fundamental, so basic to us living beings, and especially the language, the words that we use can make or mar. They can inspire or they can destroy. And the use of language is something which distinguishes us from the other living beings also. Now, when we talk about communication, it entails a part that I said language, the words. It also entails expressive communication and receptive communication. So when we talk about the expressive part, it's more overt, it is visible, it is audible, more noticeable, where an information is being given. And when we talk about the receptive communication part, it's a bit internal, which may not be so visible to others, but where we assign a meaning to the words, to the information that we are getting. So what is happening in communication? Our brain, the thinky brain and the feely brain, both are actively involved. And as I say, I reiterate that the words have a very powerful impact on anything, everything, our very, very basic existence. And when we look at it from the mental health point of view also, like when I look at it from a well-being point of view, now where is the genesis of this communication? Where does it all begin? Right at the infancy, rather right from the time of conception, when the baby is born and our brain starts, multiplying in the cell. So that, like I said, the thinky, feely brain starts absorbing everything. The words that a mother may use, then later on the words or the language that the peer group may use. And as the person keeps growing up, the communication starts becoming more and more expanded, more and more wider. So even as a receptive or as expressive, the communication becomes an inherent tool for our day-to-day interaction, dealings, and the meanings. So basically, the world we shape is based on the words that we use. And it could not be truer more in the mental health, where we do have a tendency to use few words very casually, like from a clinician point of view. I'll give you small examples, or even as a mother, or even as a daughter, or as a sister, or whatever in my role has been. The words that I hear most commonly, whether in public places or otherwise, it's you're crazy, or he is crazy, or she is nuts, or loony. ये तो भोपू है मैडम, इसको क्या समझाएंगे, ये तो लेगार्ड है, ये तो पागल है, हमें भी पागल कर रहा है. All these words, maniac, depressed, all these words are used too casually. But what happens? Every word that we use, the communication that we do, I'm laying emphasis more on the words because that's what I've seen it makes or marks you. What happens? It signifies each word that we use. It signifies something. It denotes something. Now, either we will be using the words with a negative connotation, or we may be using it with a positive connotation. So when we look at the mental health, sometimes we may use a word where we are trivializing. ये तो होता ही रहता है. इसमें क्या बड़ी बात है? You are not the only one. So in that we may end up trivializing. We may even be focusing on a single event. We may be that time focusing on a single moment. We may not be able to take in the totality of the, the picture, the, whatever has happened. So the words that we use ends up trivializing. They can also be a condensation in our communication from the words that you only can't manage. It is all your fault. Now, because of you, I have had to come to the psychiatry department. Or because of you, we are shamed. We are getting the complaints. And now we'll be asked to go and meet a counselor, maybe, the school counselor or something. You cannot do anything right. So the words, again, they are communicating. And when we link it to the well-being of a person, both expressive and receptive is having a negative connotation, which can lead to a certain kind of isolation. It can lead to certain kind of alienation. It can lead to certain kind of a stigmatization where avoidance sets in a person. Whereas if we use positive words, what will they denote to us? What will a positive connotation will be? Which will be the right word, which will be clinically correct, medically correct, ethically correct, socially correct. The impact that will have on a well-being of a person will be dignified. It shows respect. It shows a certain empathy. And it also, when we're talking about the mental health, it shows a certain kind of hope. Because the word is correct. It is gentler. It is positive. It is corrective. So that gives a hope to a person that all is not lost. Now, this is something which is, I have told you about very, very, basic, the communication that we all end up seeing around me. Because as if I look back at my, 2 decades of experience, there have been repeatedly common words which are being said repeatedly. So I didn't want to focus only on the words, but I just wanted to also tell you a broader picture of communication, what we have been coming across, so that when you move in the field, you already have some idea as to, Sanjana ma'am did talk about it. So some kind of the preparedness can be there. Some kind of, facilitation can be there already. Now, what I've done, I've just compiled a few, 4, 5 points, and with the use of an example, or maybe later on when we throw the forum open for the question, you can join the dots and ask me and we can expand on it, because I don't want to eat up too much into the time of other speaker also. Now, I'll begin with the first thing. When in the field, when we are linking communication, we are linking its impact. What happens at times? What I call the positioning. When I talk about positioning as a form of communication, what I'm talking about, not only of the space, I'm also talking about of a professional, personal positioning. Now, to give you an example, when I had to join this place in Delhi as a psychologist, it's a medical center. And when I went in for the interview, I noticed the very nice, in the foyer, the room, and, the earmark, the doctors, the thing, names are written and whatever the specialization and all. And I noticed they've even written for the counselor or the clinical psychologist and all that. So I interviewed and I got selected, and I was given a certain date to come and join. And the date of joining, when I reached there, I went there, I was shown around and all. So when it came the turn to my room, sort of a discussion started in the big boss room. And I was kind of taken aback. So I said, but I thought I saw a room, it mentioned, it has a little board there. They say, yeah, ma'am, but, we've kind of changed your place to where to sit and all. We've put you in the way he pointed out, it's like an outhouse is there, and you as a mental health professional will be seated there. Now, I was quite surprised. So I said, why? What brought in the change? He said, no, ma'am, you know how it is. No one wants to come to a mental health worker, and then they don't want to be seen. They don't want to be, kind of seen entering the room or to be even referred, and all the reasons he gave. So I just told him, I said, that means you're just kind of doing it on a hush-hush basis. So on paper, you do have that, we have a clinical psychologist, we have a family therapist, counselor, whatever designation you want to give. But it's being done on a very that way, on paper we have one, but actually what the output will be or the productivity will be there, we do not know for the organization. So a certain kind of reluctant acceptance was there for a mental health professional. So I told the person, there were 2-3 people, I said, if I may request, so I would like to be put in the same room, which I saw that day, which I was shown the first day. And we will take it from there. How the response. Let me see, it's me. Earlier, there were some people before me. I don't know how they did or whatever. So give me a chance. So this is what I meant by the positioning. That the more positive we are, the more visible we are, the more directly, expressively communicative we are about mental health in a positive, confident manner. It's like we exist. There will be less of a stigmatization, because that means we are opening the doors. We are as visible as any other medical branch, which gives help to people, which facilitates a certain well-being. So here, why was it being put in a corner? So that was one. That I say positioning of the space as to where the room is going to be. That is also going to help a lot way in the mental health acceptance, destigmatization. Second was, now I have this habit. I can't have tea in my room sitting there. And it's not that I go and disturb others, but if I'm taking my 5 minutes break, so now my room was in such a way that I had the reception counter in the front, right across. I used to lobby, I used to just hang around, go have my cup of tea with 3-4 staff members who are busy, and everybody is grabbing. So what happens in that now, when I say the positioning, now those people also at times used to tell them, if they know people familiar, by the way, this is our madam, she joined us and she's so and so. And it's like, they also see, because everybody has an image. Everybody has an image of, who are the people here or where, especially where mental health is concerned. And so many times, khade baat ho jati thi. So somebody says, हाँ खड़ी है madam, अभी पूछ लो. Just in case. So what was it? It was a foot in the door. It was breaking the ice. It was being visible. And then, so that when they come, it's not that, my God, who will be sitting there? Because one, that fear of the mental health per se for a referral, but here they used to say, she's as regular as you and me or anybody else. And that is what is very important when we talk about the destigmatization, positioning, what your comfort level is, how you are, talking about it. Second thing which I would like to talk about, before I jump to the second one, let me tell you, wherever I have worked, I have left on a high note where it's there written in my leaving certificate or recommendation reference letter, that the hospital or the department saw an increase in the patient intake since she joined. So that gives a satisfaction, and this is why I wanted to bring out this point, that communication is done in many, many, many ways. And more so we talk about positioning, the space, and the personal position. Second thing, what I would like to share with you people is it's again what we can say a departmental naming. Now what happened, I was working till 31st March. That was my last year working in Chandi Mandir. So I came out and, my colleagues, and I turned, I waved bye and I told them, see you soon. And it's literally like the Department of Psychiatry and all. And I just waved at it also literally, that I had a good time here and I'm carrying fond memories with me. And this was March. July, I came back and I went to the department to say hello, and I had to collect 1 or 2 papers of mine from there. So when I climbed up the stairs and I reached that area and I said, wait, there is a change. What is the change? Name of the department had changed. It was no longer Department of Psychiatry. It had become Department of Behavioral Studies. As Max and all, there's so many private hospitals who are now not mentioning so much as Department of Psychiatry. So when I walked in and I met the people there, and the first thing they asked me, ma'am, how do you feel? I said, I feel huge, grateful, thankful, and very happy. Because what we have done is in our own way, because usually the organizations are resistant to change. It takes them very, very long. And I'm very passionate about it. And I used to keep telling people that why is it that, Department of Psychiatry is always made in a corner? If you see, even in RML, it is across the road. But it has valid reasons for it, which are acceptable. Totally. Okay. But within that also, the visibility can be there. So this way, we changed the name, we made it more inclusive, broader, and more reassuring to the people. Because you don't need to fight with the population that, it is us versus them or stigma versus this. But it is, let's bring a change. Let's accept that mental health is a very important issue, but seeking help for their mental health is as important. Because what happens in this case also, I have had the cases where if I'm leaving from the department or going in the corridor or going to another place, and then when somebody asks me, अच्छा मैडम हमें साइकाइट्री के जाना है या आना है या क्या करके या आप कहाँ बैठती हैं, where should we come and meet you? So I tell them, अच्छा वहाँ वाले डिपार्टमेंट में बैठती हैं, अच्छा वहाँ जो वो डॉक्टर होते हैं ना, what do you mean वहाँ जो डॉक्टर होते हैं? You see how communication, because the thing is, so this way positioning, visibility, and certain, that positive handling can bring in a little bit of change in a outlook as to how we look at it. Another point which I wanted to share with you youngsters is, again, all these are coming from the practice point of view, the referrals. Because as a clinical psychologist, we do the assessments regularly and we do get the case referrals also. Like I have been getting a lot of referrals from the pediatrician, neuros, the endos, or even, the general oncos and the surgeons and all, and even for the geriatric population. So what happened, wherever I have worked, I do try to meet up with these specialists so that it is like, they know also, because sometimes what happens, the doctors don't even refer to you. Though they know that it is needed, but they may not refer to you. So one is it helps them also in understanding, because what had happened, a lot of cases were coming to me via the, where a person keeps reaching repeatedly to a doctor at a very basic level, and which actually turn out to be the need for a psychiatric evaluation or a psychologist evaluation, that why this person is coming. So this way, what happens, if a doctor is writing down, again, a communication comes into the play, the word that they use. Now, if they write down, refer to Department of Psychiatry, and that's it, they don't explain anything to them, they don't tell them anything. Because what happens when a person comes to me who's referred, usually it's written in the book, and I can make out from the date, have they come immediately or have they come out after a gap? So I end up asking them, as to कि आपको तो तब रेफर करा था, आप आ जाए, कोई खास वजह जिसकी करके आप, you couldn't come at a point. So then, हाँ नहीं मैडम, थोड़ा सा डर था, हेजिटेंसी थी, हम पागल थोड़ी ना हैं, हमें ऐसे लिख दिया, या ये पागल थोड़ी ना है, पर हम सोच रहे थे, etc., etc. The terms which are used very casually, they are being used in this. So in such cases where I have also had the cases where I have gone and met the person, a pediatrician also, where I said that, supposing we were to write down something else, and he asked me, he said, ma'am, can I write down request psychologist's opinion? Will that help? I said, of course it helps a lot. And along with it, the other doctors also, when I shared with them, I said, in case it can be written, even if you're referring them to the psychiatrist and not to a psychologist, at least if just give them a picture as to why they're not being, sent, because people have such that idea. So psycho-educate them a little bit as to what they feel is needed to be done next, and you will be reverting back to us, and then we take it up. So the communication of this kind, where psychology, a person psychologist is an interdisciplinary, very coordinative work with the other medical practitioners, this kind of a communication helps in destigmatizing and changing the attitude of the referring doctor as well as of the patient who are coming to you. It brings in a lot of change, because what happens, the words which are being used can act as a barrier also to help seeking. Now, in the armed forces, if I may tell you, it is to be fit is to be strong, and to be unfit is to be weak. So their help seeking is anyway very, very on the back burner. Help seeking regarding physical health too. Forget about the mental health. Mental health though is for them a huge kind of a taboo or a no-no. So we work from that angle also, where we create awareness, whether by the community outreach programs, or we've got our ways and means, which I'm not going to share all of them here because all the organizations are different. So I've worked in the civil setups also, and where I have seen the hesitancy, that is the same. But the foot in the door, the direct communication and all is very important for them to understand and to encourage a help-seeking behavior. So even when I meet a person, I do a case and all, I always tell them, you're happy, you're fine, you're satisfied, and if you happen to drop by, come and look me up. If you're not happy, you have a problem, you need me, still come and look me up. Because I would also like to know that how you thrive, it's nice. We can use it for others. And if you have an issue, of course, they'll be timely and that will be done. And I've had so many cases where, they used to come for their monthly medicines and all, or they come for their review once in 6 months and all. And suddenly I'll hear a knock on the door if I'm not busy. They'll check with the reception, or they will just peep and they'll say, can we just drop by Dr. Sanjana? And they have beautiful things to share with me. That, I would like to come and meet you, or I am feeling better, or I have spoken about the well-being to so many other people. So this is how the chain keeps getting a bigger, larger, in a more positive manner. Now, another thing I wanted to share with all of you was very commonly, again, the words that I mentioned to you, whenever the people who come to you, they describe a behavior, they describe the symptoms. Because in that, it is again the words that they use. So apart from the, and here I'll give you a small example again of trivializing and exaggerating. I had this, young mother and a lady, young daughter and the mother were there. And then the mother was describing the issue to me as the problem. And it was almost like the daughter looked at me and she looked at mom and she said, Mom, hold on, hang in there. And she looked at me, can I say? I said, of course, go ahead. What was happening? The girl said, she said, Mom, that's not me what you're describing. Maybe a bit of it, but that's not the whole lot of me. Because the words the mother was using, the girl was not happy with it. So some kind of exaggeration, because then the mother was sort of saying, now that you have come here, let me tell them this. But what she ended up doing was exaggerating her distress or discomfort or whatever the complaint was, to such an extent that that exaggerated form started trivializing the whole issue. So it's complicated, but the words that are used definitely are very, very important in communication. Similarly, I had a husband who was explaining his wife's OCD symptoms to me. And the first word he said, Madam, ye to paglon ki tarah lagi rehti hai. Now, that word, pagal, you would have, I'm sure, heard it so many times. So, next is, I'll come to that how easily we tend to label something. Now, here, we have to be very cautious about it. It's not the commodities we are buying or we are dealing with or, being referred to where we label them. For you youngsters, when you step out, you start doing the assessment. I have seen reports and this and so, of course, what you're getting is just a number, a figure, an IQ or something. But you write down a term like, retarded or this and that. It is going to have such a detrimental effect. Because as it is, if a referral comes to a parent, whether from a pediatrician for a child who's 6 months old or 2 years old, or a 12-year-old who's not able to cope up in the school, if that word comes, it's going to just break their hearts. It's going to be. So that labeling, one has to be very, very cautious about it. Because with label, that expectations come. Like I'll give you a small example. Again, in one of the, some staff member only, I remember in Bombay when I was working, he approached me with his wife. He said, "Madam, हमने सुना है आप वो IQ वगैरह चेक करती हैं." तो मैंने कहा, "हाँ ठीक, पर क्या हुआ?" So he said, "No, we want to get it done for our son." And I said, "What happened? Why do you want to get it done? किसी ने बोला है क्या?" He said, "नहीं, we were thinking करा लेते हैं." अच्छा, आप करा लेते उससे क्या होगा? How is he doing? He said, "He is doing fine. But अगर IQ पता चल जाएगा कि वो आगे कैसे करते हैं." Okay, it's just a number. अगर तो IQ अच्छा आ गया, आप उसके पीछे और पड़ जाएंगे कि अब तो IIT ये जो ऑलरेडी आपके मन में है ना? अगर उसका IQ थोड़ा सा कम आ गया, फिर आप कहिए नालायक लड़का, कुछ कर ही नहीं सकता। So everything, the diagnosis can be a relief, but diagnosis can also be distressful. So one has to be very, very careful, judicious in the words that one is using. I'll give you a few examples before I wind up. I'll give you very few examples of, term like he or she is autistic. Now, that's not right. It's a person with autism. Because again, the way we say it, it's going to have a lot of impact. It has lots and lots of emotional, social implications for the person and for the other person. So you have to be very cautious. Even when you write in your research papers, you write in your thesis, or you discussing it with somebody, especially in the white world, they are very, very finicky. They are very sensitive, very particular to the terms that they use. So it has to be person with autism or special needs. Now the disabled. Here I'll share a small thing with you, because again, it's a disability word we use very easily. And, it gets confused. Now, I was head of a school or a special center. I won't call it a school. It was a center for children with special needs. And we had one of the organizations as part of the Navy, which is like a Department of Education, which funds the various schools and under them. So now this center was always, I felt when I went there, I found it very, very at a level where my heart broke. So I started trying to kind of wear it around to the professional level. So once I had gone for a meeting where they were discussing a kind of, for the other schools that they had under their ambit, to have an open day or, whatever you have, annual days or open days and things like that. So at the end of the meeting, they asked me, "Ma'am, anything from your side? Any question?" I can't keep quiet. I'm sorry to say that for too long, whereas my things which are my passion, they come to me. I said, "Yes, I would also like to have an open day for my center." I could hear the pin drop. It was like, your center? What for? So why not? They're disabled. They didn't even say disabled. They're retarded. What can they do? वो तो वहाँ बैठते ही है ना मैडम, उनको हम देते हैं ना, मिड डे मील देते हैं, हम झूला लगाया है, हमने ये लगाया है, हमने वो करा. I said, "Yes, I appreciate that, but I want to have an open day." Again, I said, "Let me have it." Like I said, for the positioning. And I worked on it. And I needed, I had lovely team of volunteers and regular ones. Then I was falling short of 2. So I asked my daughter and her friend. So they were very young at that stage. I don't even know whether I was right or wrong in asking them. So I asked them, "Kiddos, would you like to help me out with that?" So they had that like thoda sa dar lagta type. But acha, auntie, what? I said, "Bache, what I want you to do it, I'm going to keep a small register, which is like a visitor's book. And when the people are leaving out, let's see if they would like to make any mention or any comment on that book." Because they've interacted with the people who are of special needs. So they were thrilled. They said, "Okay, we can handle that much." Because what had happened, they all have at that young age, they've seen movies where some kind of misappropriated, exaggerated, picture has been painted of someone who has special needs. So they were a little nervous and all. They had certain fear. So what happened on that day, I can proudly say it was one of my most successful open days. There was a huge line of people to write down their comments. And why this idea had come to me, because I had KV across me, Kendriya Vidyalaya, I had other schools, and we had these high walls, and they used to throw stones from there. And they also used to call out names for our children. This way I invited all of them. I kept it open from 9 till about 4 o'clock. And I have never seen more damp eyes in my life the way I saw that day. And I felt that my team has been successful in breaking some kind of a communication barrier of the people with special needs. Because I said, to see the ability in them. Because there, of course, we categorize them from mild, moderate, severe, profound, but still, it's not that bad. So that is one way of breaking down or destigmatization. So we do not use, and apart from that, I started this magazine also, an annual magazine for my center, where the kids' parents also contributed about their experiences. Because what happened, then they give strength to others, that we are not alone in it. And then it goes in the community where community reads about it. So it is not like, whoosh, what is there behind those walls? They are not ridiculed, they are understood. And empathy is built up by communication. We use the magazine, we use the open house, we use the expressive communication, we use information. So a term like mental retardation, we don't use. We can use developmental disability, can use intellectual disability, or any of those. Then also, instead of using the words like that's crazy, psycho, insane, nuts, we can always say it's little odd. It can be little bizarre. Or maybe it is not as it should be. Maybe it is little wild. But a sensitivity towards the words that we use. Then we also have where it drives me crazy. We tend to kind of black and white everything. So no, it annoys me if we use a gentler word. What a word that we are using is giving a different meaning to the communication that we are imparting. So when you're as a practitioner, you can help, you can facilitate a process right there and then, by helping them identifying the word that they use. Similarly, commonly it says suffering from mental illness. Now, when we use the word suffering, it's almost like a noose around the neck. It's like it's lifelong, chronic. Of course, mental illness has a severe, trajectory. Prognosis can be poor. But that when we say suffering means as if in a pitiable condition. But I, as a practitioner, you as a student in psychology, you know that there are people under Medicare, under rehabilitative services are functioning very well. They're holding jobs, they are married, they're in healthy relationships. So why use the word suffering from mental illness? Instead of that, why can't we just say living with or experiences mental illness? That is a softer word to use. That's a softer term to use. When we look at the suicide, has committed suicide. And again, the words, the tone, or the way it is being said. Because I remember when Sushant Singh's thing had happened, one of these very famous, I won't call him a guru or leader or whatever the name you want to give him. But the way he was talking about it, that why go in for suicide? Why get depressed? Just hold your nostril, take a deep breath, and you exhale, and your depression goes down. So they were trivializing the whole thing. Even the statement then that has committed suicide, why can't it be said, as WHO also says, has taken his or her own life? Isn't it? Or as we say in the medical terms, died by suicide, or completed suicide, or attempted suicide. So these were few pointers which I felt I would like to share with you. And before I end, I would also like to say that these were little tips I've given you, the way we use the communication, the way the impact comes, because I see it all the time as a practitioner, how it gets delayed, the treatment, how it gets withheld, how the blame game starts. But in our own way, where is destigmatization going to start? From us, each one of us. We cannot leave it only. That's why I said, when Dr. Harinder told me that this is the topic of our conversation today, I was thrilled. So why only otherwise discuss, we have bipolar, we have this day, we have that day. It is every day, and it is the words that we use, the language, the communication is the make or mar. So the minute we become mindful of each one, take care of the words that we use, the change will start. The focus will start. Because it is not being easy in the field, being a mental health professional. There are enough hassles about, I'm a psychologist, I'm a clinical psychologist, I'm a psychiatrist, I'm a neuro, I'm a cardio. Like any other field, it's almost the dog-eat-dog world. But that's why I said positioning. Your degree, your wisdom, your confidence, your training is going to be the way forward. I'm gray and I'm the passive member of the community. You are the active members. You are stepping now. And as I said, that draw the satisfaction from, even if you can bring about the smallest of the change. So keep expressive communication, mindful, positive, hopeful, which denotes all these things. By the smallest of the things, you girls are on technology, Twitter, Facebook, you can easily tag someone who's using the wrong word, a corrective. That don't hesitate. We don't have to be outwardly militant in our approach, but there is something called an iron approach with the soft gloves. And that is what we can do. And last but not the least, I would like to share a small, my interaction with the one bunch of, population, which gave me so much of satisfaction that, I am, or I have been on the right track for all these years. I was sharing it with someone just yesterday, that there was this child who was referred to me, 7, 8 class child, typical with that defined setting and all those kind of issues which they face. And once he started coming to me over a period of time, of course, he was in a very good space. His parents appreciated it too, and they told us that we were being so hesitant about it. Now, the other day on a Saturday, I heard a lot of commotion outside my room. And I heard that Amma trying to tell them, no, abhi nahi, madam ne time nahi diya, etc. So I said, kya hua? Unko bhejo andar, kaun hai types? And I walked till there. I said, let me. And that boy, who was my regular client and who actually didn't even need to come to me, I told him. But he was that in the sense that once in a while, so he was dragging 2 more kids in. He said, madam, मैंने इनको भी करना है, आप मैं इनको भी लेके आया हूँ आपके लिए. It's like come one, come all types. कि मतलब I'm feeling better now, they are next in line. And I was so touched that this guy has got so much of confidence now that I am being sent. Otherwise, when he had come initially, I know what the reluctance was. I know what the resistance was in him, in his parents. कि स्कूल में कैसे मुंह दिखाऊंगा, ये कैसे करूंगा, my friends will laugh at me. Now his entire gang of 4 kids were under my, that well-being program of youngster. So, and then their parents also came. So the message I'm giving you, that the lives that we touch by virtue of our profession, let it move forward and forward. Let it touch as many lives as possible, because the positives will bring out more positives. And hopefully with these kind of workshops, learnings, take homes, we will see the better days ahead for the mental health and the well-being. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for your enlightening words. I'm sure the audience is left with many questions that they want to ask you. So now I would like to invite Dr. Itisha to please speak to our audience.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Respected Principal Ma'am, Garima, Dr. Garima, Dr. Harinder, all the staff and of the Psychology Department of Mata Sundari College, and of course, all the students who invited me over here who are more than happy to hear me for the next 20-30 minutes. Thank you so much for this honor of having me on this panel. It's an honor, especially because I'm sharing this stage with Dr. Sanjana, and it was such a pleasure listening to you, ma'am. You said that in our field we are all about psychologists and clinical psychiatrists and psychologists and psychiatrists and etc. It's a dog eat dog world, and I know that, but I also know that one person's good work makes the other person's work a lot easier. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart for the kind of work that you shared that you're doing. I think it's beautiful how you're helping everywhere that you go. You're helping fight the stigma. And like you rightfully said, mental health is in a developing country like in India, it's not an easy job. So also, I completely agree with you that when the students and Dr. Garima shared the topic of this panel discussion today, I think I was most excited to be on board, because there is just so much. I think with all the things happening in a field, this kind of what we'd call somewhere called soft skills. Although I disagree that these are not really soft skills, they are very, very important part of the work that we do. They kind of take a back seat. So to have this, as a topic of discussion for Mental Health Day, I think it's beautiful. And I sure hope to spend the next 15-20 minutes doing my little bit and just giving my own thoughts on this topic. So Principal Ma'am said that language almost becomes instinctual. So for me, my mother tongue is very instinctual. I do tend to in my lectures also move to Hindi, because I feel like I express my thoughts much better when I speak in Hindi. So I hope if there's anyone who doesn't understand Hindi, please let me know. I would try to move back to English and try to keep the talk that I have in English as much as possible. So when I was thinking about this topic last night about language, it came to my mind this quote by Shakespeare. What's in a name? A rose by any other name would smell just as sweet. And I think I beg to differ with Shakespeare. And why is that? Because हमारी country में अगर रोज के बाद रोज कुमारी हो या रोज कौर हो या रोज अहमद हो, तो उससे बहुत बातें बदल जाती हैं. It's not the same. It's not as sweet as just rose. So without getting into politics, I don't want to talk about politics at our home, because I'm a feminist. I can't help but talk about social structures and gender. So because personal is political, let me start with a small example. Although Dr. Sanjana has made my job really easy by helping us identify why it is so important to be sensitive to words. But are we really, how much do we really focus on the kind of words that we use? So when I grew up, and by that I mean I became independent, I started earning. I think I didn't have too many dreams. I just had one dream, which was that I should become an empowered enough woman where I don't have to take permission from anyone to go wherever I want to. My father, being the patriarch and head of the family, I wanted to go on a trip with my friends, and I went to him and I asked him that, Papa, I'm going to Goa. So my dad is used to the other line. Papa, can I go to Goa with my friends? Because that was before I started, when I was not earning, I had to take money from him. I had to, of course, take permission from him. And this time around, I said, Papa, I'm going to Goa tomorrow with my friends. And my dad looks at me and says, are you asking me or are you informing me? And I said, whatever will make me get me to Goa tomorrow, I'm doing that right now. So I realized that for him as a patriarch, the changed question was, of course, slightly troubling for him. Same thing if you see, in this movie Dil Dhadakne Do, when Rahul Bose, if you remember this one scene, Rahul Bose and who was playing Priyanka Chopra's husband, and he says something like, "Oh, we are very progressive because I have allowed Aisha to work. I've allowed her to work." So when you use the word allowed, it definitely means that you still hold the position of power. Similarly, the other day in my class, I was, we're doing thematic analysis of an interview where a person had written, "I cannot talk to my parents." And I was asking students, what are their thoughts around this line, "I cannot talk to my parents"? And I said, if we change the cannot to will not, what changes? So we had this entire discussion between cannot, which is lack of ability, and will not, which is lack of volition. And both of these are very, very different, create very different meanings. They communicate something entirely different altogether. So definitely one needs to be extremely sensitive to the language that we're using, because a lot of us think that language kind of represents reality. That we have certain thoughts and we use language to kind of communicate those thoughts. We capture our the thoughts that we have in words and we present to the world. But one wonders, and which is what the postmodern world is about, is language representing reality or is it creating reality? So the thought and the language, the chicken and the egg story. Thought comes first and then comes language, or does language come and that creates the thought? So I belong to a community that is marginalized, especially with its treatment, and also extremely oppressive towards women. And I have more and more over the last few years become sensitive about the community that I'm coming from. Although in my training, psychology was extremely individualistic, and now we are definitely talking about how social structures affect our mental health. So my grandmother was married off at 13 years of age. She was illiterate. She couldn't read. She couldn't write. She spent her entire life not entire life, at least 25 years in the village before she came to Delhi with my grandfather. And she couldn't read and write. And when I started reading, I wanted very badly to make my dadi explore the world of words and written and writing. She could just sign her name. And as is the case in our country, women, after they've given birth to children, बच्चे बड़े हो जाते हैं, तो उनका और कुछ काम नहीं होता, they believe that अब तो बस मेरे को मरना है. So my dadi, I wanted to teach her how to read and write when she was, let's say, 50 or 55 years of age. Until then, she said, नहीं, अब तो मैं अगले जन्म जाके ही सीखना है मैंने. उन्होंने अगले जन्म का, ले लिया था कि अब मैं अगले जन्म में ही सीखूंगी. And mind you, she didn't die at least 30 years तक. I think she passed away at 85 years of age. I think she could have had good 30 years of reading and writing if she would have been motivated, but she just took on that script and role of being an old woman whose kids are gotten married and settled, etc. Now why I'm saying all of this is that when I am from my father's side of the family, I'm the first woman to be studying, not studying, working, and especially at the kind of position that I'm working today. And so when I would explain my dadi what I'm doing, people can, मैं डॉक्टरी कर रही हूँ, मैं इंजीनियर हूँ, तो ये सब बातें I think समझ में आती है, but मैं साइकोलॉजी कर रही हूँ, मैं कैसे समझाऊं? साइकोलॉजी क्या होता है मेरी दादी को नहीं पता है, तो मनोविज्ञान क्या होता है वो भी उनको नहीं पता है. तो I think the easiest way I found out was जो उनकी लैंग्वेज जो उनको समझ में आती कि बीबी मैं ना पागलों वाली पढ़ाई कर रही हूँ. लाइक पागलों वाली क्या होती है? मैंने कहा वही आपने पता है ना आपको, तो पागल शी अंडरस्टूड. देयर वर एब्सोल्यूट, एंड दैट्स द ओनली थिंग आई कुड टॉक टू हर अबाउट माय फील्ड, क्योंकि वी डिडंट हैव वर्ड्स. सो बिकॉज आई डिडंट, मैं पागल की जगह में मेंटल हेल्थ में कहाँ जाऊं, कौन सा मेंटल हेल्थ डिमेंशनैलिटी और डिसऑर्डर्स और डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ, कैसे कहाँ किधर क्या एक्सप्लेन करूं? एंड दैट्स मेड मी रियलाइज दैट when you don't have language for something, probably that phenomenon may not even exist for someone. And similarly, language is so very important because it is tied to social action. The kind of words that we use become part of our identity, which is again what Dr. Sanjana was trying to sensitize us to. For example, I had gone for an interview, of assistant professor in a college, where one of the gentlemen in the board will ask me a question. And he asked me, how do you teach backbenchers? And I thought that was a little odd question. How do I teach backbenchers? Because I've never referred to any of my students as backbenchers. And the only answer that came to my mind is, sir, I move at the back of the class, so they become front benchers. And that's how I teach them. So I realized that it's my positioning. Again, Dr. Sanjana talked about positionality. It's my position in the class that determines who becomes a front bencher and who becomes a backbencher. And I walk around my class to teach. I almost teach in a way that it becomes more of a circular, involved group conversation, rather than me standing in front with my, on towering onto my students, and some students only the front benchers listening and the back benchers not listening. So backbencher and front benchers are not just words, they are identities. So language constructs reality, and it can serve people. It can serve to create realities that may be biased towards certain groups of people and may be oppressive towards certain groups of people. So it can become an instrument of oppression. Again, as a feminist, I'm going to bring in more examples of gender. So when we think of words like slut and friend zoned, these are some very common words used to label women. She's a slut, and no woman wants to know, no, I'm not a slut. Don't slut shame me. And friend zone, oh, she ends up friend zoning. And I wonder who made these words. Who made these words? I don't know if women would have made these words about themselves. And then there was this one beautiful quote that said that, naming is in the hands of men, right? So slut is a word they have reserved, they've attached to a woman for a right to say yes to sex. And friend zone is attacking a woman for a right to say no. So similarly, eve teasing. Eve teasing is not the word. Sexual harassment is the word. Why eve teasing and not why sexual harassment, not eve teasing? eve teasing का मतलब निकलता है से छेड़खानी करना. छेड़खानी कौन करता है? भाई बहन एक दूसरे को छेड़ते रहते हैं. This is sexual for men and for the society. What is eve teasing is harassment for me, and it dilutes my experience when you call it, अरे eve teasing तो होती रहती है लड़कियों के साथ, कोई बात नहीं. So when dominant groups in society have the power to name, they use it for their advantage, thereby furthering the oppression of the marginalized with the help of language. And language, using the language by creating a certain kind of reality and perspective, which has to be accepted by everyone else. But that's the beauty of language. It can be used as an instrument of liberation also. So when feminists started using language, telling their stories, giving voices to women, telling our realities, telling our side of the story, we were able to not just liberate ourselves, we were able to liberate other people also. I do remember just in last 5-6 years, we have, I opened the newspaper one day and I read the Oxford word of the year is mansplaining. And I was like, what is mansplaining? Man explaining to a woman as if they know better. And I realized, oh my God, this is our reality. This has been happening all the time. We just didn't have a word for it. It's mansplaining. Similarly, I'm going to tell you something that happens very often, but nobody knows this word in our country. I've spoken to a lot of young girls, and I've been fortunate enough to, for them to trust me to share a lot of their experiences. And one very common experience on my end and of a lot of young girls over the years has been that in schools, many of us have been told to walk not next to the staircase, the other side. Or in some schools, we have boys staircase separately and girls staircase separately. And while some of us know why that is the case, some of us also don't know, which is that unfortunately in certain schools, it's a common practice for boys that they would stand beneath the staircase and they would kind of, you understand what I'm saying. So nobody talks about it. It's all hushed up because it's women's issues and girls' issues and feminist baatein, krantikari baatein hoti hain, etc. Now, I came across a word recently called upskirting. And upskirting is a word that means that you, without permission, when you take pictures of people, people, mostly women, without their permission, they say kapro ke niche or whatever. And I couldn't help but think, I mean, you were too young, but when first time jab camera phones aaye the, one of the first few advertisements of camera phone was a man sitting in a restaurant zooming onto a woman's face, right? So upskirting is illegal in UK. It's a law. If you're caught clicking photographs of women without their permission, about their, underneath their clothes, etc., you can be jailed. Do we even know about upskirting in our country? Do we have any narrative, any story, any quint, any magazine, any article that you could have read about upskirting? No. This is about, I wanted to take this little bit of the starting time to emphasize on the power that language has to both oppress and liberate people. Now, let me come to psychology's relationship with language. Although a lot has been spoken by Dr. Sanjana, I would still like to put in my 2 bits. Starting with first year in psychology, the language that we use for people that we work for, subject. सब्जेक्ट आ रहा है, सब्जेक्ट जा रहा है, सब्जेक्ट नहीं है, सब्जेक्ट भाग गया, सब्जेक्ट इधर, सब्जेक्ट उधर, सब्जेक्ट. And it is so hard because, and you have also been coming from school where this language is being used in practical reports, etc. And it takes me so much time. I don't care about the content that you've written. The first thing that I'm correcting is participant, subject nahi, participant, subject nahi, participant, subject nahi, participant. It almost seems like you wanted to call them object, but since you can't call them object, you give them a little better deal over here, which is subject. So subject, it is dehumanizing to call someone a subject baitha hai, subject ek kar hai, subject ko kar hai. It is, participant means that they are doing you a favor, which they are most of the times. If all psychology students know how important it is to have someone who's agreed to be part of your research work, and then you go like, mera to subject baitha hai. Second, I don't know how many of you know the history of the word imbecile, moron, and idiot. Of course, most of you know that these words are abuses. To idiot hai kya, to stupid hai kya, to imbecile, you're such a moron. How many of you know that these were actually medical terms used to classify people with intellectual disability in 1700 and 1800s? Right? So what we know today is mild intellectual disability, moderate and severe. They were idiot, imbecile, and moron, except that over the years we tended to use them as pejoratives. So they ended up becoming abuses, and that's why they had to be changed. And so another name was given, which was mental retardation. But the beauty of being human beings is that I'm being sarcastic over here, is that we of course converted that also into an abuse. So we have हम लोगों को modify, change करनी पड़ रही है अपनी language, because the common masses, of course, because the stigma against mental health starts using disorders as abuses. So that's why today mental retardation, and of course there are other reasons also, that's not the only reason. Retardation of course does not reflect reflect what we want to communicate about intellectual disability. But I'm very sure that in the next 20-30 years we'll have to change intellectual disability to someone else, because someone will I hope not, but someone will start using, oh, you have ID, you have intellectually disabled, to the the same thing as pagal. So this thing that we use disorders as abuse, it contributes to so much of stigma. I'm so afraid of that word. I'm afraid of being labeled as schizophrenic or dyslexic. So much so that, I remember this one kid said that, I used to have a lot of difficulties reading, writing, but I didn't, and students used to tease me because they'll call me Ishan Avasthi from Tare Zameen Par. So Ishan Avasthi's name of a character who had dyslexia, and in the movie was supposed to sensitize you, by the way, and you started using that as again, a pejorative statement for someone, right? Now let's also talk about how special is the word special. For many people, special was used to again communicate that this is different, but positive difference. We evaluate them positively. Do we? And special, almost now, ye bacha special hai. You are using the politically correct word, but your sentiments have not changed. You're still talking about segregation, right? However, I have seen in the last, again, I don't have as much experience as Dr. Sanjana over here for sure, but in the last decade that I've been in this field, I have definitely seen that disorders are not no longer may not, a certain group of people no longer use disorders as abuse, they started using it as adjectives. You know, it's almost like कि हम जो छोटे बच्चे को पहली बार कुछ शब्द पता लगते हैं तो हर चीज में वही यूज करता रहता है, something like that. So if you want to communicate I'm sad, I'm going to say I'm depressed. If I'm going to say I'm afraid, you'll say oh I'm so phobic. If you like cleanliness and structure, you'll say oh I have OCD. If you want to say oh she's extremely manipulative, you'll say oh she's psychopath. If you want to say oh she's selfish and self-absorbed, you're going to say she's so narcissistic. Now what I'm okay with is the fact, if I can use the word okay with over here, is the fact that at least there is some sort of reading up awareness about these terms. Like I said, I'm coming from my dadi who didn't know anything else from pagal to now we have depression, phobia. ये words at least लोगों की consciousness में exist कर रहे हैं. Whether they're correctly using it or labeling it or not is definitely the ideal over here. So conversation has started, but we need to give direction to this conversation. And this is the most important question. Who gives direction to the conversation on mental health? Okay, what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, what is right, what is correct, what should be done, what should not be done. Something as simple as, should the word even abnormal psychology be used anymore? Should we use the word abnormal anymore? Normal, abnormal. Abnormal bacha, normal bacha. What is this? Wouldn't typical, atypical be a better? Because it just refers to percentages of people. Typical is an average person. Atypical is who's not averagely found. So when you talk about normal and abnormal, we have to start a discourse on exactly who will define normality, what is normality, and what is abnormality. Right? If I can share a very small story over here that I use very often to drive home this point, is that so there was this man. I read the story somewhere and I really used it in my classes now. There was a man who was hiking, and while hiking he reaches a place, he gets lost and he reaches a place which has an isolated tribal community. So I hope you all know what is an isolated tribal community, that who've never been in touch with the civilization, the rest of the world, etc. So when this man reaches this community, he realizes that this person, this entire community has congenital blindness, that they were born without eyes. And of course, this person, typical person in our world, was an atypical person in their world, because he would be talking like, अरे आज दिन जल्दी निकल गया, रात हो गई है, सोना चाहिए, कितना सुंदर लग रहा है ये रोज, इतना येलो कलर का, ये वो. So he's talking about this. And in their world, who've never experienced the visual sense, for them ये पागल है, क्योंकि ये बड़बड़ा रहा है अपने में, पता नहीं क्या बातें करे जा रहा है. And they're very concerned about this man. Oh my God, ये बेचारा, इसका क्या करें हम, let's help him out. So to help him out, they realize that he has something on his face here that is giving him these, I'm using the word delusions over here, that is giving him these whatever word they would have chosen to describe this. So what they do is they operate him and remove his eyes, because they wanted him to be normal, because they wanted him to be like rest of them. And so we have deeper questions here in our field. It's not just about labels, it's about understanding normality, understanding disorders, understanding typicality. And of course, there are other things like, let's say, one thing that I would bring up over here is triggered. Triggered is again a word that is very commonly used. And I've heard the younger lot, Gen Z, and I've heard the, my seniors in my college, for instance, and I've heard from both sides. And of course, I have students who are like, ma'am, trigger warning. Why didn't you give trigger warning? Ma'am, please use trigger warning. And then I have my older generation who's like, ये क्या बच्चे trigger करते रहते हैं, मतलब क्या है? And I think I get both of them. Because for one, that if I'm a psychology teacher, I will be talking about things that might make you emotionally react in certain ways. It's almost like, for me, it's almost like asking, जैसे आप surgeon को बोल रहे हो कि नहीं मुझे तो dead body नहीं देखनी, something like that. So we will be talking about things that will be a lot more sensitive than your average classroom, of course. So about trigger warning now. The word triggering, what does it mean? Does it really, am I ticked or am I triggered? And that again can be questioned, can be asked, because for many of the younger generation, which is considered to be more sensitive, etc., I think they can have a comeback and that says that the older generation has been too bigoted and too insensitive in their approach towards life, and they may not be wrong about that. So we talk about misgendering, and we talk about when I started teaching, मेरे school में his होता था, हर example में एक लड़का होता था, and I thought that really affects the representativeness. I do never get a woman in my mind as an example. However, when I started teaching, I'm like, no matter how hard it is, I'm gonna always use his slash her, his slash her, his slash her. Even when I'm talking, I try to make sure that I use his slash her, until some of the younger students in my class pointed out that, man, can we use them? And it's more sensitive an approach to pronouns. And I was like, yeah, sure. What is it gonna take me like a year to get used to them? And now I correct myself much more easily when I'm writing or reading, and it makes someone feel included. Why not? What's the big deal? Why should I stick to his? Because I realized that some people may have had intense difficulty when they had to move on to his slash her, and that is how change works. So let me have that difficulty and go towards them, right? Now the question is that who gets to name? Who gets to name? Who's the authority, naming authority over here? कौन है ये? And I feel like अगर आप बोलो कि क्या हमें blind बोलना चाहिए या visually disabled बोलना चाहिए, क्या हमें alcoholic बोलना चाहिए, substance dependency बोलना चाहिए. Someone said, sorry, Sanjana ma'am said autistic नहीं बोलना चाहिए, person with autism बोलना चाहिए. But a lot of people with autism says autism is not a shame for me. It's not a disorder for me. It's part of my identity. It's like a queer person reaffirming their identity and calling themselves queer. I take back this word autistic, I remove all the shame from it. I am a proud autistic. I'm not a person with autism. So Divyang, if you understand, disabled, differently abled, what do we call? His, her, them, they, what pronoun should I call? And the answer is very simple. Ask the people who are being named. As simple as that. इसमें इतनी बड़ी बात क्या है? जिसको आप नेम दे रहे हो उनसे पूछो कि okay, would you want to be called Divyang? Is differently abled? Is it what do you want? Do you want me to call you autistic? Is using the word autistic okay for you, or should I call you person with autism? Because two people with autism could have very different preferences, and why should we not give them that? मतलब अगर मैं पैदा होते मेरी माँ बाप ने मुझे कुछ ऐसा नाम दे दे जो मुझे पसंद नहीं आता है. There's a lot of people call me Ishita, and I'm like, I'm not Ishita, I am Itisha. So अगर मुझे ज्यादा ही अपना नाम नहीं पसंद आता तो गवर्नमेंट भी मुझे ये हक देती है कि मैं अपना नाम बदल सकूं. So if I do not like being called an alcoholic, or if I do not like certain words to be used for my community and my people, I should have the full right and power to rename and rechange that. Second is, and I firmly believe that today, psychologists should not have the hegemony on discourse of mental disorders. We must and should kind of take the back seat now, give the mic in hands of people who have these so-called, who've been labeled with these so-called disorders, to talk about, to bring in their lived experiences. And that's mostly because we have too far along kind of spoken about people with mental disorders as if they don't exist. So, for instance, a lot of my research work has been in the area of autism. I have very close friends with ADHD, late diagnosed ADHD, late diagnosed people with autism. And what I hear about their life is very different from what I hear, what I read in DSM and what I read in ICD. And so much so that, as you know, well, humble brag over here, I've been a university topper. I have been very, very seriously into my work and studies. कभी ऐसे lightly नहीं लिया कि हमेशा लगता था ये syllabus में ये disorder छोड़ दे, कोई कल मेरे पास आएगा तो मैं क्या बोलूंगी, आपको मैंने पढ़ा नहीं syllabus में. तो हमेशा बहुत seriously अपना work लिया. And yet it took me a year to realize a very close friend of mine had ADHD, never diagnosed, never heard about it, always going to people and getting labeled with अरे आपको depression है, आपको anxiety, etc., not realizing that underlying that depression and anxiety was neurodivergence. His brain doesn't work like mine. And world, instead of seeing him as different, sees him as lesser, sees him as lazy, useless, not good for nothing. All of these labels, right? So वहां पे यहाँ पे जब वो डॉक्टर्स के पास जाता है तो मेरे को भी ADHD दिमाग में क्या आता है, एक बच्चा जो बहुत ज्यादा उछल कूद करता है वही आता है. I have never learned what ADHD, how it looks like in adults. And when I read DSM and they go to doctors, you haven't failed enough, you haven't given your job, you haven't lost enough jobs, you're not hyper enough to have ADHD. And so a lot of people with ADHD together, they're forming support groups and communities because they feel misunderstood by mental health professionals. So the discourse of mental health, mental disorders cannot just be, psychiatrists and psychologists. There are lots of women with autism who are now part of researchers. They're amongst us. They're my students who are going to take this discourse forward. And of course, they're adding a different voice to it. And again, coming to positionality, they're insiders. There is there's a girl with autism who's doing university research in University of Oxford on how autism presents itself in women has been, not understood at all. Third thing is that I do not think it's wrong to use wrong words. I don't think so. I think it is wrong to assume you know the best. That's the problem that I have. If someone is not using the correct word in my class, like the other day, someone was calling displacement as a defense mechanism. They said, oh, she's projecting. I said, no, that was not projecting, that was displacement. And then I went on to explain why it is what they are describing is displacement and not projection. But the other day, I also met a man who did not know that, who did not have any awareness about the fact that I'm a professor of psychology, which is okay, but we happen to be talking about something. And he said, he used the word projection and he used it incorrectly. And the problem was he was mansplaining projection to me. He did not let me speak. He was extremely dominating. The problem is he thinks that a woman in front of him would not know psychology. And if I would have, and chances are, I didn't feel motivated enough to correct him, like, oh, you know what, I'm professor of psychology, because sometimes you have to pick and choose your battle as a feminist. But yeah, I thought even if I tell him that, he's just going to over-explain, trust men to explain periods to women. So it's going to be something like that, right? So lastly, and coming to the last part, about this entire, there's so much to be covered over here, but I think teachers, educators, mental health professionals, mental health advocates, and psychology students need to do more. We need to do more because, especially after COVID and pandemic, people are looking for support. People are looking for koi psychologist ho to batao, counselor ho to batao, mere bachche ko ye problem. I think one of those things that COVID has done is that it has reduced stigma. I don't think you can afford to have a stigma with after everything that you've gone through. Sabko pata chal gaya ki emotions kis tarike se kitna isolating in grief and social distancing and ekdam ye jo zabardast change jo aaya tha hamari life mein, to what extent it can affect you, your mental health. मुझे नहीं लगता कोई ऐसा इंसान है जिसने जो बोला होगा कि नहीं मैं तो बहुत खुश था during the pandemic. So that for a lot of people it has definitely broken the ice. Like how वो जो flooding वाली बात होती है ना वो हो गया, धीरे धीरे systematic तो नहीं चल ही रहा था over the years, but this has been flooding. So a lot of people are looking for support. Unfortunately, the good part about internet is that we have a lot of information, which is also the bad part of internet. So for the first time, someone is describing me as an influencer. I am not an influencer. I kind of shirk away from that title, influencer. I was just someone who had a Facebook or Instagram account on during the pandemic. And then I read a comment like, psychology says that if you cannot sleep at night, you're awake in someone else's dream. ये कोई फैला रहा था ऐसी खबरें और मैं पढ़ के मैं हंसू रहा हूँ, क्या करूँ, मतलब मेरे को अगर नींद नहीं आ रही है तो इसका ये मतलब है कि मैं अपनी कॉन्टैक्ट लिस्ट में लोगों को फोन करके पूछूं कि कौन सो रहा है, कौन मेरे को सपने में देख रहा है, प्लीज सो जाओ ताकि मैं भी सो जाऊं, या सॉरी प्लीज उठ जाओ ताकि मैं भी सो जाऊं. So this nonsensical, people with so many followers, हर कोई मेंटल हेल्थ को मतलब कोई हो सकता है कि सबके मोटिवेशंस अलग हैं, हो सकता है किसी के someone genuinely wants to work in this area, but it's almost like saying अरे मेरे को genuinely लोगों की जाके ऑपरेशन करना है तो मैं हॉस्पिटल में घुस के लोगों का ऑपरेशन तो नहीं कर दूंगी ना. So there are people who with good intentions who want to contribute to the field for sure, but they again need training, they need learning, they need education. And then of course there जो कमी नहीं है लोगों की to fleece people who think that counseling is nothing more than आमने सामने बैठ के बात करना, advice giving or agony aunt kind of a behavior. So I found that there is a space, and I thought that there's a lot of complaining that we've all been doing, especially academia में ऐसे क्या पता नहीं क्या चल रहा है आजकल, psychology के नाम पे कुछ भी हो रहा है, and I just started filling in that space as and when and how I liked. If I whatever I do in my classroom, if I can put it out there in the world in some simpler forms. As teachers, especially हमारा job complex, हम complex बहुत आसानी से कर देते हैं. I'm sure my colleagues would agree over here. If I tell anyone what my thesis topic for my PhD work is, theory of mind and executive functioning in autism, high functioning autism, मैं बोलती हूँ, मुझे खुद ही लगता है कि मैं क्या बोल रही हूँ, क्योंकि सामने वाला पर्सन जो मुझसे सुन रहा होता है बातें, a lot of times it sounds like in my head कि lymphosarcoma of the intestine type of मैंने कुछ बोल दिया है, like for those people who've seen Anand, of course they would understand this, get this joke. So it's very easy to do complex stuff. Complex बातें हम बहुत jargon, scientific jargon ये करते ही रहते, conferences में भी करते थे, उसका अपना ही importance है. I'm not even going to belittle that. It's not my attempt to trivialize that. I can do that well myself, and I have been doing that for the longest time in this field, kind of aping and copying what your role models in the field, and you do that. But I realized that it is more challenging आज की डेट में हमारी कंट्री में with very limited resources. Mental health को कितना हमारे एनुअल बजट में मिलता है हम सबको पता ही है, स्टिग्मा इतना ज्यादा है, उसके ऊपर से परेशानियां जो मेंटल हेल्थ की हैं, एंड स्टेज कैपिटलिज्म, एनवायरमेंटल इश्यूज, क्लाइमेट चेंज, पैंडेमिक्स, एंड तो कमी नहीं है, ऊपर से communalism, your riots and protests and all of these things. So there is no dearth of problems that are going to affect our mental health. And there is a space over here, and that space needs to be filled in. It's not and let me also say that it's not an easy job. Research changes every day. Every single day we have to kind of keep updating ourselves, keep hearing voices, keep knowing, learning more and better, and then presenting it out there. So yes, we are going to make some mistakes here and there, of course. Like I said, I do not completely believe that using the wrong word is बहुत बड़ी word आपने कुछ बात कर दी. It is believing that you and only you have the authority to know and to talk about mental health in whatever way that you want to. So many of you are coming from many different parts of our country, which is the beauty of government colleges. आप सबकी अलग-अलग mother tongues हैं, सबकी अलग-अलग you have your own history, your own families, your own community that you're coming from. You yourself know what are your lived experiences of that community that you're coming from. And one again, language की बात करें तो हम इसको कैसे डिनाई कर सकते हैं कि जब मैं अपनी ये पढ़ाई खत्म करके मैं लोगों के साथ मिलना शुरू किया मैंने कि अच्छा चलो अब साइकोलॉजी को पढ़ ली मैंने, अब अप्लाई करते हैं, चाहे वो काउंसलिंग हो, चाहे वो इंटरव्यू हो, चाहे कुछ भी हो. वन ऑफ द बिगेस्ट स्ट्रगल्स वाज मेरे को तो पता ही नहीं एंजाइटी को हिंदी में क्या कहते हैं और स्ट्रेस को हिंदी में क्या कहते हैं, और मैं तीव्रता और मैनिया को हिंदी में क्या कहते हैं, तो मैं कैसे एक्सप्लेन. एंड इट वाज ऑल ओवर द सर्कल वाज the wheel which I started from my dadi. How I don't have the language of the mental health language is so elitist. It is English for me, so it was such a big limitation. तो क्या मतलब फिर साइकोलॉजी मेंटल हेल्थ सिर्फ इंग्लिश बोलने वाले को और दो चार वो डोमिनेंट लैंग्वेजेस जो हमारी हिंदी हैं या साउथ में निमहांस तो कन्नडा है या एक दो ये जो these dominant languages किसी जो सिटीज की हैं उसमें बस है मेंटल हेल्थ उसी के लिए है, फिर और किसी के लिए नहीं है मेंटल हेल्थ. So हम लोग we can really, if we find our own space, if we find our own value and how we can contribute to this entire discourse on mental health, at the end of the day we are going to, like I said, that सब अच्छा काम करेंगे तो एक दूसरे को मदद होगी, and the entire issue of stigma, of mental disorders, of mental health, of well-being, and I'm coming to well-being now, that gets recognition and that gets better in our country. So yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think you've just made our jobs easier because so many questions you've already addressed. And the moment you said how, you should use the word participant and not subject, all our teachers in the department, like, just came to my mind because that is the first thing, which we were taught when we entered into like first year and practicals. And as you said that, with time, you do understand what is the right thing, and how there is nothing wrong with using the wrong word, but then being open to change when told about. And we also agree that the experience of any disorder or experience of life also in general is like so subjective. So it's the best to ask the person, because every person might have different opinion about things. Like some of them might prefer to take autism as their identity, while others might also feel that it is just one part of them and that is not their entire life. So we completely agree with that. And now I would like to move on to the discussion part. And my first question is directed to Dr. Sanjana. So, ma'am, you discussed that how words have a very powerful impact on everything and anything, and how each word signifies something. And we did understand how we should not use words like crazy and insane to label anyone, because it does have a negative connotation. But what about when we use words like crazy and insane in our everyday language to to refer to our friends, and it might be just to connote that we don't agree with you, or they might be doing something which we consider as abnormal or absurd, so as to put in words. So how do you think that contributes to how mental health is viewed and the social status of mental health?
I'm sorry, you'll have to repeat a little bit again because I missed out on that part. I
No
was
issues,
trying
ma'am.
to unmute myself and I wasn't able to do it. Just initial part of the question, please.
Yes,
Thank you.
ma'am, no issues. So, ma'am, I was saying that you said how words have a very powerful impact on everything and anything, and each word signifies something. And you did also tell us that how we should not use words like insane and crazy, because more or less they always have a negative connotation attached to them, and it might have a negative effect on the person whom we are labeling. But what about when people use these words to refer to their friends, and just to refer to things where they don't agree with the other person, or just because they feel that this is something which should not be considered normal, so we just call our friends like to the pagal hai, to the insane hai, ye kisi baat kar raha hai, and we don't even mean anything by that. But do you think that can also contribute to the stigma around mental health, and also to the status of mental health anywhere in the world?
Of course. And, that's why I said at the beginning that I'm very happy about the topic of the panel discussion today, because you, as you said it, you people are psychology students. If you don't have insight and the mindfulness toward the words that you are using, who will have? So, if you correct your friends for using a wrong word, wrong as in, um, what we consider inappropriate word, non-clinical or, hurtful word, they may not understand it the first time, the second time, but once we persist with something in a positive manner, explain it to them, or we at least start using the right words ourselves, the change starts coming. And no one is expecting that, overnight, everybody will have just a perfect vocabulary or the language or the words, because even we may slip up at times. We ourselves, I myself personally, I also may slip up at times, whether in a joking manner or something, you never know. But awareness, the insight towards a particular word, that does not mean that we really have to be reading over a sentence, under sentence, between the lines kind of anxiety. All I'm asking for is a sort of a mindfulness to use the softer words, the correct words, because what are we going to talk about? There are, of course, individual differences, and we cannot change them all. But what we can do is change ourselves. And we hope that how we respond, how we react is going to be, having an impact on the other person. So after some time, even they may say, oh, this kind of a language is not, I'm not getting away with this kind of a language. So I may as well. Because all said and done, few things are said in jest, but yes, change also will come. No one is saying that there will be no sense of humor at all and all. It will continue, but not in that ridiculing, demeaning, condescending manner.
Thank you, ma'am. I think you've explained it very well. Dr. Itisha, would you like to add to this?
I think Dr. Sanjana has fabulously answered that. Just about humor, like people, of course, say कि बहुत sensitive हो जाते हो आप और बहुत sensitive हो, and we're just joking and it's just fun, and why are you so serious all the time, etc. I think what we need to be mindful about is that when you are making fun of or um, you know giving some jestful comment about an oppressed group, it is not humor, it is oppression, it is bullying. Let me use the word bullying. So only Black people can talk about their life experiences, joke about it, etc. As an outsider, I can't. So when you make fun of people in power, that is humor. But when you make the privileged people, when you make fun of them, that's okay, that's humor. But when you make fun of the already existing oppressed groups and communities in the, including the people with mental disorders, they are oppressed, they are marginalized. Ma'am rightfully said that the spacing of the the center, where the psychiatrist or psychologist sits in the hospital is very important. If you look at it, AIMS is one of the biggest hospitals in Delhi, and it's India, and it's situated in heart of Delhi. बट हमारा जो हम शादरा का पागल खाना बोलते हैं जिसे, तो वो कहाँ पे है? वो तो हमने नॉर्थ दिल्ली में कहीं डाल रखा है, हमें पता भी नहीं होगा कि किधर है, कितने लोगों को दिखता है, वो नहीं दिखता, बिकॉज वी वांट टू कीप इट आउट ऑफ आवर व्यू, इभास. So yeah, just wanted to add that.
Thank you for that. So just following up on this, right? So we've talked about using words like crazy and insane. So there is some research that says that over time, when you use words like crazy or insane, they actually start having the detrimental effect on your own life. But, and like Dr. Itishra ma'am also, she talked about language creating our realities and vice versa. But some people, they do find these terms cathartic, and in some sense they are talking about normalizing their negative experiences. So do you have anything to say about that?
Is this question towards me or for Dr. Sanjay?
It's for both of you, if whoever
I'm
wants.
sorry, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Sanjana ma'am, would you like to go first?
I think ma'am is inaudible. So it is a ma'am, you can go. I'll just see if there is any issue at the back end.
Right. Okay, so the thing is that when I'm using the word pagal and crazy, a lot of people want to reclaim the word. They want to normalize the word. They want to have fun around the word, or they want to use it as an adjective for themselves. And just like probably an analogy I can again think of, which again I probably mentioned in my talk also, is queer. Queer was always used as an abuse, that, oh, he's so queer, and etc. But the LGBTQ community has de-stigmatized the word queer, and now it does not have the same kind of stigma that it did so many years back. And in the same way, if someone with a bipolar disorder, someone with a schizophrenia, someone who's been labeled as crazy says, "Main to pagal hu," who am I to say, no, please check your statements about yourself. Please don't label yourself. Please don't. It is patronizing for me to tell someone with a mental illness what they are supposed to call themselves. So if they want to use that word, I guess it's fine. But if I am someone who doesn't have that kind of marginalized experience that someone with mental illness does, and then I'm saying, मैंने पागल तो इसलिए बोला कि पागल तो बड़ा normal word है, मेरे friend है उसको bipolar, अपना को पागल बुलाती है, वो बुला सकती है, तुम नहीं बोल सकते हो, unless you want to call yourself like that. वो अलग बात है कि चलो okay, मैं तो बड़ी so these are some nuanced things that you need to think about. And one of the assignments that I would give when I would teach abnormal psychology is just go and talk to 5 people and ask them what pagal means for them, and everyone comes up with a very different take to this. Like for instance, our watch person, watchman Thapa Bhaiya in our college, and so a lot of girls would go to him and say, "Bhaiya, pagalpana aapke liye kya hai?" And anyone who's asked, and it's very easy for us to call pagal. सबसे difficult होता है आपसे अगर मैं बात करके पूछूं, बताओ नहीं बताओ पागल क्या, define pagal, what is the definition of pagal, नहीं आप बताओगे, तो तब आपको पता लगता है that it's very difficult to define what is pagal. So Thapa Bhaiya ended up saying that, and he's been here in our college for, let's say, years and years. उन्होंने कितनी generation of young girls को देखा है कि जो हम हरकतें करते, कभी डांस कर रहे हैं, कभी ड्रामा कर रहे हैं, कभी थिएटर कर रहे हैं, कभी रो रहे हैं, कभी हंस रहे हैं, which is the beauty of girls women's college. So he ends up saying that ये पागलपना तो कुछ भी नहीं होता है, तो जवानी का जोश होता है.
Thank you, ma'am. I think the way that you put it, and I think we all agree with Thava Bhaiya in a way, because at times we do use the same definition, and like how pagalpan also has like two connotations, the negative as well as positive. It's all about in which sense we use it and how we put it across. So, Sanjana ma'am, are you able to unmute yourself now?
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible. So,
am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible. Am I audible to you, ma'am?
But
am I audible to you, ma'am? Sanjana ma'am?
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm having some kind of a tech glitch. I don't know.
No issues, ma'am. So, ma'am, my question is that you talked about, how the whole department of psychology as well as psychiatry is often sidelined, and, even in purview of where the building is and, how it is located, it is always in the, like at the end, towards the end, where it is not very visible. And do you think that, when we talk about physical illness and when we start school, so we are often told about physical illness, like almost all students, like all children, they know, like if they have any ache, any sort of anything, so they know that, I'm not well. And they're often told that health is synonymous to the physical situation of their body. And then I think around 9th and 10th, in India especially, we start with the subject of psychology. Like that is when the subject is introduced, and even mental health is introduced. So do you feel that somewhere introducing mental health at such a late age, it kind of creates a stigma, because it might be firstly that not everyone has studied till that age, till like 10th class or 12th class. So they might never get the chance to actually know about that subject. And secondly, like we kind of say that, only some people are able to understand. And even in general language, people mention that how psychology is like the subject of privileged people, of people, who are very probably privileged or of the upper class at times. We use stuff like that. So do you feel that parents as well as teachers, they have a role to play to actually sensitize children to talk about, like to explain mental health to them? Or do you feel that they are probably not able, like they're not capable of understanding mental health? Like, what are your opinions on that?
See, it's a very nice question. And first of all, I lay a lot of emphasis on parenting, because a child's maximum learning, that whatever we talk about, deceptive communication or this, it all comes from the parents. And before he or she steps out of the house, they have seen a lot around in their own homes, how the illnesses are being discussed, how someone, who's crying is being dealt with, how an aged person who's dependent is being handled or being dealt with. So some kind of that, the info sponging has already been done by the thinking brain. Some kind of that has already been done. And when they come out, when they step out, of course, the teachers are there in the school. One part is this. Second, what I feel, there is an age and a stage for all kinds of learning. Even if we talk about, I remember when I was asked to take workshops on, so what we call good touch, bad touch, or appropriate touch or inappropriate touch in the schools. So we had the discussion that exactly at what level class should we go down to? Because we don't want to put any kind of a fear in the young minds. Like I told you, when I asked my daughter and her friend to volunteer, now I didn't want them to be fearful, because the schools were adjacent, and then they were familiar with the kind of children, and they did have an image. Plus the movies also portray an image where an impression is there. So this is something, when we talk about mental health, I will not say that this is the perfect age, because everybody is maturing at a different level. Hence, the parents, of course, have a huge role to play in how they elevate the fear, the anxieties, or how they talk about it. That's what I gave you the example, what the kids see at home. Similarly, in school also. And thirdly, this is something very new. I heard for the first time what you told me, that psychology is a very elitist paper. I know I haven't really come across it. Nobody's brought it to my notice. And I'm very happy you brought it. Because what I have been seeing, that has become a very popular subject, very hugely. And there have been cases where, when the child is asked, the student is asked, the one who wants to opt for it, or a parent has asked, for some kind of advice or a guidance. I'm also part of a mentoring program for young students. So I always explain to them that this is, what do you understand by psychology? Because there's a difference between pop psychology and the psychology. And a lot of them, like Itisha had also said, that it is not only talking across, or somebody just talking and giving gyan or something like that. It is not. It's a scientific study. So once they are explained in that manner, then the elitism and all is not. It's just that the accessibility is there. So psychology, being a practical subject, may not be available in all the schools. So for that matter, supposing, for example, it is not available. I'm not too sure about Delhi schools or any that, but supposing it is not available there, so they may think that, these kind of subjects are taught only in particular school. I had a discussion with someone who's a policy maker, that why doesn't CBSE, right from class 5 onwards, give as many options as possible, even including carpentry and all the skill-based training. So then the child knows. So I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, ma'am, you've answered it very well. And the thing that you suggested at the end, how even the policy makers agree that this should be a subject which should be introduced at class 5 level, because I feel that it is all about the study of human beings. And like we learn about everything, but then human interaction is something which is like inevitable. So unless or until we learn about humans, it's kind of like a thing that you require. It's a necessity, I feel, because you will be interacting with humans no matter where you go. You can't work in isolation. So I think understanding and studying psychology might really benefit the young minds from an age, and may also make them more sensitive towards other people. And the sort of abuses and violences that we have, it might come down. Like, I can't be certain of it, but I think that it definitely has a role to play. So, Paneet, you can go with the next question.
So we've just mentioned, Dr. Itisha mentioned about elitist, how psychology is an elitist field, and Dr. Sanjana was also mentioning it right now. And Itisha ma'am also shared, the story of a grandmother taking into consideration, how she did not know the words other than the word pagal. And this year's Mental Health Awareness Month theme is also mental health in an unequal world. So how do you think inequality of education and awareness affects like the language that is used within psychology, like what kind of language we use, and also how it is perceived? Because words can be scary and at the same time they can be comforting.
Right. So your voice was kind of cracking in the middle. So can you repeat the last bit of your question, the gist of the question that you're wanting to ask?
Right. So I just wanted to ask that since the theme of the Mental Health Awareness Month this year is mental health in an unequal world, how do you think inequality of education and awareness affects the language we use in psychology, as well as how we perceive the language that we're using?
Okay, so as far as I understand your question, you're talking about how the theme of mental this year is health in an unequal world, and you're talking about how the quality of education received by someone can affect the accessibility of mental health services in that way, or understanding that this could be a problem, something like that, कि okay, अगर मुझे पता हो कि ये दिमागी बीमारी होती है, कि स्किज़ोफ्रेनिया है, और एक ये इसके लिए दवाई अवेलेबल है होती है, या ये the very fact that I know something like a mental illness exists in itself can become something of a privilege that comes from those people who've read these textbooks and books that are describing it, right? This is the question.
Yes, so like you said, it could be a privilege to know if somebody has something, and that would, help them explain whatever is going on in their lives. But also, if somebody who doesn't know anything at all, and we say words like, oh, let's say you have schizophrenia, then it could also be a very scary experience for them.
So first question, of course, I would like to answer that, like any other anything else in education that we talk about, whether it is being literate, being able to read and write, beginning from that to having the knowledge of your rights, fundamental rights in this country, your duties in this country, to taxes कैसे भरते हैं, to form कैसे भरा जाता है, ये सब basic knowledge के साथ साथ even learning about mental health, what is the difference between psychiatrist and psychologist and counselor, and क्या इसकी ये the very fact that क्या ये problem भी है, क्या इसके लिए कोई availability है, नहीं है कोई इसको, people could be suffering for years and years and years altogether before actually approaching for help. Part of it could definitely be the fact that they are not informed. There is no awareness. And of course, the second part and the huge part that we must focus on is also the stigma. For instance, many of you would have right now seen this documentary that has been very popular and everyone's talking about this, which on Netflix, which is covering the the family in Burari that killed themselves, 11 members in the family. And while it was very disturbing, and I would not advise anyone who's in a vulnerable mental health state to actually watch that, it's been very disturbing for me. But the end of it was the fact that there was one man who was experiencing delusions. There was one man who had schizophrenia, possibly, I'm hypothesizing over here, of course. He was hearing voices, and in many ways he was able to convince everyone in his family, of course, which is beyond the purview of present discussion about how the group dynamics would have developed, where nobody wanted to kill themselves. It's not suicide, it's not a murder, and yet they ended up doing that. It's just, and nobody talks about it because I'm guessing that these people were educated. One of the daughters who got engaged 1 week before this incident was working in a corporate. So education तो है, पर लेकिन स्टिग्मा इतना स्ट्रॉन्ग है कि शायद हम लोग बात ही नहीं कर पाए कि अच्छा, अगर मेरे सामने कोई फैमिली मेंबर बोल रहा है, मुझे आवाजें सुनाई देती हैं, I would definitely be like, let's go to a doctor. I would not start thinking of supernatural and शायद कोई forefather उसको actually में भगवान की आवाज आ रही है, या all these things, because of my not just education but also because I do not the stigma that's not there in my mind right now. So yeah, that's my take to the question that you asked.
Thank you, ma'am. I definitely get it, because it has been true. It's like people have been watching, a lot of things are coming up, and we see, for example, the Burari case, and we see that how they were at that time and how stigma affected them. And even generally, even around us, even when cases are not serious, we do see that it takes so long for people to, get the help that they need, even if it's not a clinical disorder, and just sort of a turmoil if they're facing that as well. So thank you so much for bringing that up. Gursheel, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, now we'll be moving to the audience Q&A, and I'll quickly ask the first question. Dr. Sanjana, have you joined back?
I'm
yes,
right here.
Yes, ma'am, I can see you very clearly now. So, ma'am, there is this question from the audience where they're saying that I would like to ask, how can we correct someone when, while expressing their experience, they use words like depressed or any other disorder casually and redirect them?
Being too aggressive about it or condescending about it?
Yes, ma'am. Basically, how should we react?
Sure enough by saying, oh, you then substitute in the conversation. It's almost like when you're rephrasing, then you can substitute the word which he or she used, which is not appropriate. You can substitute it for the correct word and say the sentence again. And the person usually are, receptive. They may say, no, 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 I know what I say, all right, but this is what I understand. I agree with you, but as far as my knowledge, or I think it is the correct. And in worst case scenario, if someone is being so stubborn, you can say, let's Google it up, or let's ask a professional. Though I feel Google also is such a mine of, thing, that one's got to be very judiciously sieve it, like a tea sieve, and then take the information. One can always say, all right, let's check it out with a expert or someone who's better versed than us.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So, Dr. Itisha, we have a question that, a lot of Indian institutions and curriculum that has been taught in the Indian context, actually not Indian institutions, but the Indian context, right? So there are some deep-rooted biases and there are notions that people have picked up as a result of socialization or the Western effects. So how do you think that we could overcome this?
I think it's such a difficult question to answer, because what is Indian psychology? What is the Western bias? Because our field in itself is going through so much of internal conflicts and struggles. Like, for instance, when I studied psychology, it was purely individualistic. It was, unconscious analyze kar lo, आप CBT में आप अपने thoughts देख लो, और behavior में behavior change पे reinforcement punishment कर दो. That's it. That was all that change was all about for us in an individualistic setup. But when I started talking to people, sometimes in counseling, setup, and sometimes outside the counseling setup, I realized, oh my God, I don't think I'm trained for this. How do I change the thoughts of a woman who's going through gender-based aggression and violence in her family and tell her कि आप meditate करो और thought change करो, behavior change करो और बस change will happen. I found out the limitations of a field there, and from there began my journey of trying to find my place that felt okay, that fit in that, and that was the critical perspective. And I started developing a critical perspective to my field कि कोई भी कुछ भी कह रहा है, question it ki, okay, and also understand the perspective that it comes from. Allow yourselves to appreciate multiplicity. There is an individualistic perspective, it has its own pros and cons, and there is also a social structural perspective to behavior, and that has its own pros and cons. So if you talk about we do have biases. I teach a paper called DOPT, and I teach the history of psychology, and I don't just teach it in a way that, oh, this theory and this psychologist. The first thing I mention is that look at how many men are there in your syllabus that you're studying, and try and identify a woman who you're studying. Who's the woman? Karen Horney, at best. One woman who's standing there who we are studying, which is Karen Horney. So 95 to 99% of psychology that I'm teaching is white, old men. There is no diversity of perspectives. And that again is also liberating in a way that it helps me say, provide that, it liberates me because it also gives me the space. Now that I know ki ye field hai, so I can be critical about the field and I can make space for myself. Then I realized that your voice is missing. I'm motivated to bring my voice as a woman, as a psychologist, as someone with my experiences, and influence the field in my own way. So sometimes जब आपको नहीं मिलता कि अच्छा, you try to find your tribe, you try to find your community, you try to find your perspective. Trying to find your perspective in the field is exactly like kind of not fitting in. I always feel different. क्या करूं, क्या करूं? So then you try to find your community, and sometimes when you can't find something that fits in, you start your own. So that's how I can answer this question given the limited time that I have.
Thank you. So there was like a little follow-up to this. So one of the audience members, they shared that in their school, these discussions are not happening. And even when there is a curriculum related to sex education and mental health, they're not including everyone. They don't include LGBTQ communities, LGBTQ plus communities. So how could we use language, and how do we actually help them bring this up?
That question was for me?
Yes.
Okay. So who are we trying to help over here? When you say we want to help them, who are the them in question? I missed that.
How can we gradually help the schools to include these topics, and what kind of language to use so that they actually understand what they have to talk about?
I think schools need and teachers need to understand that we're competing with Google now. Especially in online classes, if I'm teaching, students don't have to listen to me. They don't have to anymore. Classroom में फिर एक डंडा प्रेशर होता था कि आप अपना फोन नहीं खोल सकते हो. आप हमारे कॉलेज में कनेक्शन ही नहीं आता तो इंटरनेट तो दूर दूर की बात है, आता ही नहीं था क्लास में, तो क्या सर्च करेंगे. But now if I'm speaking something, they can quickly recheck it online. Okay, so we need to understand as teachers, our job is no longer कि हमारे 20 साल पुराने नोट्स हैं, 15 साल पुराने जो नोट्स थे हम उसी को वापस रिफर्बिश करे जा रहे हैं, उसको ही पढ़ाए जा रहे हैं. क्योंकि if you know the world is completely online now, there are people who are presenting information in packages in a way that is simple, that in a way that is understood, in a way that is also very well informed. So in that way we have to, and also all the criticisms that students probably may not have asked us before, they may not have questioned our syllabus. I have students who say our syllabus is antiquated. We don't talk about caste, we don't talk about class, we don't talk about gender, we don't talk about sexuality. All of these things affect our mental health. What are we studying then? And I don't disagree with them. I completely agree with them. So if the whole point is that if we will become redundant too soon if we don't evolve, if our knowledge systems remain the same and stagnant and do not evolve. So for me, every child I know is, at least, I wouldn't say they have full knowledge of everything that they're speaking, but they have a knowledge of, because they're reading something. पहले की तरह नहीं है कि सिर्फ आप यूनिवर्सिटी स्पेसेस में ही नॉलेज गेन कर रहे थे. अब नॉलेज हर जगह, अब नॉलेज व्हाट्सएप पे, इंस्टाग्राम पे है, फेसबुक पे है. हाँ, गलत नॉलेज भी, सही नॉलेज भी, फेक न्यूज भी, हर तरह का आपको वहां पे मिलेगा. लेकिन what is my relevance as an educator? What is even rethinking universities in the pandemic times? University spaces, what am I contributing in my classroom? If in a social influencer 15 सेकंड में उसकी रील बना के उसको शायद मेरे 1 घंटे के लेक्चर से बेटर एक्सप्लेन कर पाएगा. So these are things that are very, very pertinent. And like everything that has gone through change, there will be light thrown on education. And how are we responding to these changes?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much. Over to you, Gushil. And I'm also really sorry that we've kept you back, but our audience is just so enthusiastic today.
I may add just one point to what Itisha has brought out beautifully about I just wanted to say one thing, that teachers are doing a beautiful job, let me tell you, because whatever limitations are there in our country, whether resources, whether in policy making or policy implementation, but we also have to somewhere encourage the students, as she also said that the Google is on the fingertips, that anytime all the learning cannot be just given by one person. The teacher will do his or her best, definitely, but a lot depends on those people also to keep expanding their horizon. So it is not only about, so that's what I wanted to admire all the teachers who are doing such a wonderful job, and also put the onus on students that don't think, even if the syllabus is upgraded, even if the new books are, because every day something new will come up. So on their own behalf, taking the onus on themselves, they will have to keep upgrading them. So teachers as well as the students. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, just before we move towards the end of the session, I will take this one last question. And the reason why I'm taking this question is because I think I'm also very close to this question, as it has made me think so much and at times enter into such deep thoughts. So the question is that, do you think at times that just by labeling someone as different or abnormal can make the other person feel concerned? And the reason why I'm taking up this question is because when clinical psychology was introduced to all of us, we often had these discussions that, what after all is normal and what after all is abnormal. And there is no segregation, in the whole of psychology, even if we see disorders or personality traits, they're all on a spectrum. So there is no clear line suggesting that, at this point, this thing is normal and at this point, this is abnormal. So do you feel that when we label people as different or as abnormal, it might actually make them feel concerned. Like, should they feel concerned firstly? And should we be using these words? And this question is for both of you. So I would like to start with Dr. Sanjana.
The term labeling, that we cannot, of course, label anyone. And Itisha brought out beautifully that let the person say that how they want to be addressed, isn't it? So when we look at it, and normal, abnormal, all these terms and all, even the doctors, they know that the BP card, this is the rate it should be average to be healthy. So when we talk about mental health, what we are talking about basically is the function. That as long as a person is able to deal effectively, function, think rationally, and cope effectively, adjust, that person is functioning normally, healthily, isn't it? So normal, abnormal, and all, unless where it is so dysfunctional, where it is meeting up with the criteria, where it is veering off from the average, where it is, like a U-shaped curve, if you see that the edges are the extremes, but most of the time people will be there. So that is why now we don't stick only to that biomedical model. That's why we look at the mental health also. We look at a person from social angle also. So we call it that biomedico-socio approach. So taking that into consideration, I think I've answered your question.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Dr. Itisha.
Yes, I think just adding to what ma'am has said, labels is a huge debate in our field. There is a function of labels, and the function of label is to quickly communicate to the other person what we are trying to say. So if I say schizophrenia, for let's say a psychiatrist, it could mean that this person needs X medication. So it's I don't have to get into all the details. This is an experience that a lot of people have with psychiatrists, that they don't give you a lot of time to talk, because their approach is that if I'm giving you half an hour to speak quickly, I have to put you into antidepressants, antipsychotics, or let's say, mood stabilizers, etc. and off you go. Because और मेरे पास medications नहीं है इतने, आप 178, 140 जितने disorders, so to speak, जितने भी exist करते हैं DSM में, I don't have medication for each and every one of them, right? So that's the purpose of label. It plays a function for sure. But that's just the biological model. If we talk about, let's say, the psychosocial model, so to speak, I think a better approach is to ask, what support do you need? What support does this person need? Aapko kis cheez se, isn't that the be all and end all of even labeling a person, that when we provide a label like schizophrenia, doctors will be able to find out, communicate with each other that this person needs this kind of a support, right? So क्या support चाहिए हमें, वो उस पे focus रहना चाहिए. हमारा focus label पे बहुत ज़्यादा चला जाता है. That is again a form of stigma, and that's again we are so touchy about labels because of the stigma in society. As psychologists, my job to only use or not use a label judiciously, like ma'am pointed out, is only to the extent to which that I want to figure out what is the best form of support this person needs for the struggles that they're going through.
Thank you, ma'am. It seems that everyone in the chat box and audience wants me to express appreciation for the panel discussion today. Sanjana ma'am, your years of experience, your depth of understanding, and your ability to explain the subject in such an interesting way produced one of the most memorable events of this department. Itisha ma'am, you're an inspiration to all our psychology students, and you make us hopeful for the upcoming generation of Indian psychologists. Your psychology advocacy makes the world a better place. Thank you for taking out the time and being so patient to help our students and audience understand language, sensitivity, and stigma. I'm sure that this event has helped us all learn and better ourselves. A special thanks to you on behalf of Department of Psychology and IQAC Mata Sundari College for Women. It was truly an honor to have you both here, and we look forward to your esteemed presence in future events. I would like to invite Dr. Lokesh sir, our coordinator, IQAC, to please address the audience.
वोट ऑफ थैंक्स के बाद नहीं बोलना चाहिए, आप लोगों ने सारा थैंक्स कर दिया है. कुछ बचा नहीं है बोलने के लिए।
सॉरी सर।
और लगभग 3 बजे से मैं कॉलेज में था और अब घर आकर चाय पीकर बैठ गया हूँ आराम से। सुना इशिता जी को और संजना सेठ जी को बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आप दोनों का। आपने हमारे इंस्टीट्यूशन के लिए समय निकाला, IQC के लिए, साइकोलॉजी डिपार्टमेंट के लिए, माता सुंदरी कॉलेज के लिए समय निकाला, इसके लिए बहुत धन्यवाद। और आपने जिस तरह से क्वेरीज को सॉल्व किया, जिस तरह से आपने केसेस को सॉल्व करने की या आपने अनुभव से बताने की कोशिश की, वो अपने आप में काबिल तारीफ है। तो आपका, मिसेस सेठ का, संजना सेठ का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। धन्यवाद डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ साइकोलॉजी का। और जो बच्चे यहाँ पर काम कर रहे हैं, वो गुरशील कौर, परनीत कौर और जो अभी और बच्चे हैं, उन सबका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद कि आपकी लीडरशिप में ये कार्यक्रम हुआ, आपने कंडक्ट किया, बहुत खूबसूरती के साथ कंडक्ट किया। यही इस कार्यक्रम की खूबी है कि आज महानवमी है, दुर्गा नवमी है, और मेरी स्थिति लगभग वैसी है कि देवी दरबार में जैसे भैरव बैठा हो, लगभग वही स्थिति मेरी है। और जहाँ पर हम देवी आराधना की बात करते हैं तो भैरव के पास जरूर जाते हैं एक बार, चाहे आप वैष्णो देवी क्यों ना जाते हो, पर भैरव जी के जब तक नहीं जाएंगे तब तक वो यात्रा पूरी नहीं मानी जाती। तो ये समझ लीजिए कि मैं वही एक भैरव हूँ और मुझ तक पहुँचना है। कई स्तर पर बात की जा सकती है और मैं बहुत ब्रीफली बात करूँगा कि IQAC कोऑर्डिनेटर के व्याप पर बात करूँ, एज ए टीचर बात करूँ, एज ए बर्सर बात करूँ, एज ए जेनाइट स्टूडेंट बात करूँ, या किस लेवल पर बात की जाए। मुझे लगता है कि इन सारे लेवल्स को हटाकर मैं अपने आप को यहाँ 1-2 मिनट देने की कोशिश करूँगा, इन सारी चीज़ों को हटाकर, क्योंकि इन सब के पीछे कहीं ना कहीं कुछ शब्द छुपे होते हैं, कहीं ना कहीं कोई भाषा छुपी होती है। उस भाषा पर मुझे नहीं जाना चाहिए। मुझे जाना चाहिए उस समय कि अब यदि मेरी क्लास में बच्चे हैं, असाइनमेंट, मैं बहुत प्राइमरी सी बात करूँगा यहाँ पर, असाइनमेंट लिख कर लेकर आए बच्चे, मैं कहूँ कि क्या लिख लाए? नहीं, मैं ऐसे नहीं कहता क्या लिख लाए, अच्छा लिख कर लाए हो, इसमें कुछ और ऐड हो सकता है, इसमें ये चीज ऐड हो सकती है। हमें अपने काम को दिखाना है, हमें बच्चों को डराना नहीं है। यहाँ पर एक फोबिया चलता है, उस पर्टिकुलर टीचर से बात करने का मतलब है डर लगता है, बहुत डांटेगी। क्यों डांटेंगी? किसने राइट दे दिया डांटने का? क्यों डर लगता है? जैसी शक्ल सूरत है वैसी तो है, डरावनी है तो डरावनी सही, लेकिन हम डांट थोड़ी रहे हैं। हमें बात करते समय बहुत पॉजिटिव होकर बात करनी चाहिए, स्टूडेंट से बहुत पॉजिटिवली बात करनी चाहिए। मुझे एक जैसे आप लोगों ने बहुत सारे केसेस सुने, मुझे केस याद आ रहा है JNU का। एक लड़का SIS के बाहर, मैं नाम नहीं लूंगा लड़के का, ना किसी टीचर का नाम लूंगा, एक SIS स्कूल है, वहां पर बैठकर रो रहा था। उसे पूछा किसी टीचर ने, क्यों रो रहे हो? असाइनमेंट प्रेजेंट नहीं कर पाया। क्यों? इंग्लिश में था, ना ज्यादा अंग्रेजी समझ में आती है, ना क्लास में ज्यादा टीचर की समझ में आती है। JNU की हालत बता रहा हूं मैं आपको। उसके बाद एक टीचर आता है जो बाद में उनके सुपरवाइजर बनते हैं, तो उन्होंने कहा रोने की जरूरत नहीं है, तो मेरे साथ काम करना, PhD मेरे साथ करना। ये MPhil के फर्स्ट सेमेस्टर की बात है। आप अगर आप जिस लैंग्वेज में लिखना चाहते हो, आप उस लैंग्वेज में PhD लिखना। मुझे वो टीचर बहुत अच्छे लगते हैं। आप यदि लैंग्वेज बैरियर के आधार पर कहीं डिस्क्रिमिनेट होते हैं, तो वो हमारे एजुकेशन सिस्टम पर सवाल खड़े करते हैं कि हम क्या दे रहे हैं उनको, क्या पढ़ा रहे हैं उनको। हमें कोई कहीं लिखा नहीं है कि हमें साइकोलॉजी इंग्लिश में ही पढ़ानी है, कहीं लिखा नहीं हमें मैथमेटिक्स इंग्लिश में ही पढ़ाना है। ये ठीक है, हमारे एकेडमिशियंस की गलती रही है कि उन्होंने सिलेबस तैयार नहीं किए हिंदी में, उन्होंने सिलेबस तैयार नहीं किए। कहना चाहिए हमें डिमांड करनी चाहिए कि हमें सिलेबस हिंदी में तैयार करने, हमें सिलेबस रीजनल लैंग्वेजेस में भी तैयार करने चाहिए। आने वाले समय की डिमांड है। चैलेंजेस तो बहुत है, और ये कहीं ना कहीं ऐसा साइकोलॉजिकल प्रेशर। अब मैं जब दिल्ली आया राजस्थान से, मुझे हिंदी नहीं बोलनी आती थी, मैं हिंदी पढ़ाता हूँ, ना मुझे हिंदी बोलनी आती, ना मुझे इंग्लिश बोलनी आती। मैं ठहरा मेवात का, मुझे थोड़ी बहुत मेवाती बोलनी आती है। अभी भी हिंदी के उच्चारण में बहुत तकलीफ है, हिंदी का उच्चारण सही नहीं है, बहुत सारा ऐसा कुछ कुछ गड़बड़ होता ही रहता है उसमें। बहुत सारे लोग कहते हैं तुम्हें हिंदी बोलनी नहीं आती, क्या हिंदी पढ़ाते हो? भैया मैंने 22 साल तक वही हिंदी उन्हीं टीचर से सीख कर आया हूँ जो गाँव के स्कूल में पढ़ाते हैं। मुझे बहुत प्रोफेशनल टीचर्स नहीं मिले सिखाने के लिए। तो ये आपके मानसिक स्तर को बहुत प्रभावित करती है सारी चीजें। ऐसे न जाने कितने एग्जाम्पल्स हैं। आप काम करते हो, आप वर्क प्रेशर में हो, आप अभी क्या होता है, आप काम कर रहे हो, पहले मेरा काम कर देना, बाकी छोड़ देना। क्यों? आपके साथ ऐसे ऐसे शब्द रखे जाते हैं आपके साथ बात करते समय कि तुमने क्या देखा, वो बिल्कुल नॉनसेंस। अभी पागल पागल बहुत कुछ हुआ, हम लोगों को जेएनयू में बहुत पागल पागल, हमने उसकी एक डेफिनेशन निकाली कि पागल को पॉजिटिव में बदलो, स्टूपिड को पॉजिटिव में बदलो। क्योंकि पागल और स्टूपिड बड़ा ये कॉमन शब्द है, दोनों बहुत यूज होते हैं। हमने कहा पर्सन इन डिमांड, स्टूपिड। हमने लिख दिया स्टूपिड कि ठीक है हम स्टूपिड है लेकिन हम डिमांड में है, हम काम कर रहे हैं ना। स्टूपिड है तभी तो काम कर रहे हैं, स्टूपिड नहीं होते तो काम थोड़ी करते। ये बहुत सोचने समझने वाली बात है। आज इसीलिए काम कर रहे हैं क्योंकि लोग आराम कर रहे हैं, हम काम कर रहे हैं, स्टूपिड है। तो वो स्टूपिड, वो पागल, वो जो हर जगह टैग लगा दिया जाता है कि कोई लैंग्वेज के आधार पर, किसी को कल्चर के आधार पर, किसी को हम रीजन के आधार पर कहते हैं कि वो पर्टिकुलर रीजन का है, वो एक गाली की तरह से करार। क्यों क्यों? हमें हमें हम पढ़े लिखे लोग हैं, हमें एजुकेशन में बदलाव लाने की बात कर रहे हैं, हम सिस्टम में बदलाव लाने की बात कर रहे हैं। मेरी जितनी कैपेसिटी है मैं उस कैपेसिटी में काम कर रहा हूँ, जो लोगों की और कैपेसिटी है वो सब अपनी अपनी कैपेसिटी में काम कर रहे हैं। हमें अपने कैपेसिटी के दायरों में रहकर काम करना है। फिर हम क्यों सुन रहे हैं पर्टिकुलर वो काम नहीं करने दिया, उसने वो काम नहीं करने दिया, वो काम करने नहीं देती? अरे क्या हुआ? काम करने के तरीके खोज लो। तरीके तो है ना काम करने के, बिना किसी को बाईपास किए हुए आप काम करो ना। तरीका खोज लो। तरीका खोजना आना भी चाहिए। ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि हम बस अपनी एरोगेंसी में बैठे कि नहीं मुझे एक बार मना कर दिया अब मुझे काम नहीं करना। एक बार मना किया है ठीक है, पोलाइटली, फिर दूसरी बार हमें जाना है काम करने के लिए, फिर तीसरी बार जाना है काम करने के लिए। हमें दायित्व मिला है काम करने का, हमें काम करना है और बार बार उस दायित्व की पूर्ति के लिए हमें प्रयास करते रहना चाहिए। कई बार ना कुछ लोग आते हैं आपसे मिलने के लिए, अब बहुत जरूरी भी हो जाता है, आप बहुत अजीब से बात कर रहे हो, वो कहते हैं यार तुम हुआ क्या, तू जैसा पहले था वैसे तो बात कर ही नहीं रहा। क्योंकि पहले थे तो एक होता है ना इनफॉर्मल होकर बात करना, बिल्कुल बिल्कुल ये अलग तरह से बात करना। नहीं कुछ प्रेशर चल रहा है इसलिए वहां पर हम बिजी चल रहे हैं, इसलिए अभी कुछ वो दिमाग में कुछ भी नहीं है। ठीक है, प्रेशर अपनी जगह, दोस्त आए, आप दोस्तों के साथ दोस्ती की तरह से बात करें। अगर आप दोस्त आए और आपने उसके कंधे पर एक जब अच्छा सा जमा कर बात नहीं की तो फिर कैसी दोस्ती? आपको दोस्त के साथ उसी टोन में बात करना है। आपको ये बताना नहीं कि अगर आपका दोस्त जूनियर रह गया, आपका दोस्त पढ़ा लिखा नहीं है, आपका दोस्त कमजोर रह गया किसी कारण से, और हम उसके ऊपर ये झाड़ने लग जाए कि अब तो मैं तो ये हो गया हूं, तुम कुछ भी नहीं हो। दोस्त है ठीक है, वो अपनी जगह पर है, हम अपनी जगह पर हैं, लेकिन उसको ये एहसास नहीं हो जाना चाहिए कि ये बहुत बड़ा हो गया, हम बहुत पीछे रह गए। तो हमें कहीं ना कहीं ये आज बहुत सारी चीज मैडम सेठ से और इशिता नागर जी से सीखने को मिली, और इशिता नागर जी ने जिस तरह से अपनी अपनी एक लाइफ हिस्ट्री हमें बताने की कोशिश की। तो एज ए एक डिसेबल, क्योंकि इन सब के पीछे, कई पदों के पीछे कहीं ना कहीं एक व्यक्ति, मेरा जैसा व्यक्ति जो खड़ा है वो एक डिसेबल व्यक्ति खड़ा है, जो पानी का गिलास भी शायद किसी के मांगने पर लेता है, कहीं पानी पिला दो भाई। वो उसके अपने चैलेंज होते हैं, उसके अपनी मेंटल स्थिति है। मुझे तो पता नहीं मैं क्यों पढ़ा, मुझे तो आज तक ये नहीं मालूम चला कि मैं नौकरी करने के लिए पढ़ा था या शादी करवाने के लिए पढ़ा था। मुझे आज तक ये पता नहीं चला क्यों पढ़ा मैं, और क्यों मुझे, या मेरे पापा की वो एक सेंटेंस कि आज अगर तुम ठीक होते तो मैं तुमसे कहता जाकर मजदूरी कर लो। मैं इसलिए पढ़ा था, मुझे नहीं पता, लेकिन वो सेंटेंसेज, वो बातें, वो लोगों की बातें वो आज भी कानों में गूंजती है। शायद हो सकता है मैं इसीलिए पढ़ा हूं। आज भी मुझे ये लगता है कि लोगों की रेस्पेक्ट करनी चाहिए। अगर हम एक पर्टिकुलर कैटेगरी में एक कैटेगरी से बिलोंग करते हैं या एक पर्टिकुलर डिसेबिलिटी से बिलोंग करते हैं, तो आपको उस पर्टिकुलर कैटेगरी या डिसेबिलिटी के लिए आपको न जाने क्या क्या सुनने समझने के लिए मिलेगा या मिलता रहा होगा। ये चीजें हमें सोचनी समझनी चाहिए। मैं अक्सर कहता हूं कि हमें तो उन जगहों पर भी जाने से लगभग मना कर दिया जाता है जो सगुन वाली चीजें होती हैं, कि रहने दो, इसको पीछे रखो, अच्छे अच्छे लोगों को ले आओ। तो क्यों मैं 2 रिजर्वेशन की हमेशा वकालत करता हूँ। नंबर 1 विधवाओं का रिजर्वेशन, नंबर 2 विकलांगों का रिजर्वेशन। बाकी रिजर्वेशन मैं नहीं जानता हो या ना हो, लेकिन 2 रिजर्वेशन जरूर होना चाहिए। अगर इन दोनों लोगों को रिजर्वेशन नहीं दिया, 2 कैटेगरीज को रिजर्वेशन नहीं दिया, तो संभवतः इन दोनों के बारे में सोचने वाला कोई भी नहीं। भला हो एक्ट का कि एक्ट आ गया, लोग सोच रहे, अदरवाइज कोई सोचने वाला नहीं है। तो चैलेंजेस बहुत हैं, मेंटल स्ट्रेस बहुत हैं, बहुत तरह के स्ट्रेसेस में हम लोग काम भी करते हैं, और एवरी डे एक नया, एवरी स्टेप पर एक नया स्ट्रेस भी आता है, लेकिन उसको हंसते हंसते हमें लेना चाहिए, उसको हंसते हंसते हमें लेना चाहिए। और क्लास में जब जाते समय हमें ये जरूर सोचना चाहिए कि मैं स्टूडेंट था तो मेरे टीचर्स ने मुझे सपोर्ट किया था, अब मैं टीचर हूं तो मुझे स्टूडेंट्स को सपोर्ट करना चाहिए। मैं कोई तोप नहीं बन गया। जिस एज में मैं हूं, जब मेरे स्टूडेंट्स जाएंगे, उस एज में वो हो सकता है मुझसे 20 किताबें ज़्यादा पढ़ जाएं, और वो मुझसे अच्छे स्पीकर हों, मुझसे अच्छे चिंतक हों, मुझसे अच्छा काम करते हों, अच्छे रिसर्चर हों। ऐसी अगर हम भावना लेकर कुछ काम करेंगे तो आई थिंक बदलाव तो आएंगे। और जो स्ट्रेस के लेवल हैं, जो क्लासरूम स्ट्रेस के लेवल हैं, वो क्लासरूम स्ट्रेस के लेवल भी कम होंगे। बहुत धन्यवाद, आप लोगों ने मान दिया, सम्मान दिया, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
थैंक यू सो मच लोकेश सर, आपने हमें इतनी सारी बातें दी है अब सोचने के लिए, अपने साथ लेके जाने के लिए, क्योंकि आपने जो कहा आई थिंक हम लोग सभी उस चीज से अग्री करते हैं। तो आपका बहुत बहुत थैंक यू एंड बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। Now, I would also like to thank Dr. Garima and Dr. Harinder for putting this event, and Dr. Pranita for like always supporting us for every departmental activity. Without you three, I don't think so this event would have been possible. I would also like to thank our wonderful audience who has been so enthusiastic and eager to learn. With this, I would just like to remind you all to kindly fill our feedback forms through the link that have been shared with you. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe and have a wonderful day.